Before the gods ruled Olympus, before heroes shaped legends, there was a force even Zeus feared. A shadow born from the cracks of creation, a goddess no temple dared to worship. Her name was Eris, and a single whisper from her lips burned empires and started the war that changed the world forever. Welcome to Whispers of the World, where forgotten myths, ancient empires, and hidden histories awaken again. If you love stories that blur the line between legend and truth, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let us step into the darkness and witness the rise of the goddess the gods themselves tried to silence. In the beginning, before kingdoms rose and before gods carved their thrones in the sky, there was night. Not the night mortals know, gentle, cool, quiet. This was primordial night, an endless, breathing darkness that moved like a living ocean. Its silence wasn't absence, it was power. A power older than time, a power older than light. From this abyss, where shadows curled like ancient serpents, the first beings emerged. They were not born. They unfolded, shaped by raw forces that even the later gods feared to speak of, and among these beings was Nyx, the mother of night. Her presence was not evil, not good, simply vast, immeasurable, and eternal. Her footsteps were storms, her breath was the cold between stars, her shadow was the cradle of mystery itself. Nyx walked through the void as if she owned it. Because she carried within her the silent blueprint of all that would ever exist. And it was from her deep core, where darkness thickened into substance, that the oldest children were formed. They were not shaped by love, not shaped by intention, but shaped by necessity, by the cosmic balance that demanded duality. From Nyx came Thanatos, death, silent and calm. From Nyx came Hypnos, sleep, drifting like a soft, eternal mist. From Nyx came Morpheus, dreams, weaving visions across the emptiness. But not all of her children were gentle. In the folds of her infinite shadow, something began to stir, something restless, volatile, untamed. A pulse, a spark, a vibration of unrest, trembling like a storm trapped inside a shell. Nyx felt it growing, a force that resisted silence, a mind that disobeyed stillness, a soul that refused harmony. The void around her shifted, rippling in waves of unseen tension. Something hungry was about to be born, with a breath that could split mountains, mountains that did not yet exist. Nyx released this force into the early cosmos, and from her shadow stepped a figure, lean, sharp, burning with an energy that unsettled even the void, eyes like feral stars, a smile carved not from joy but from curiosity, dangerous curiosity. She was not soft like sleep, not silent like death, not gentle like dreams. She was something else entirely. She was Eris, the primordial goddess of strife, chaos, and discord in the cosmos. Shifted around her. Where Nyx brought silence, Eris brought disturbance. Where Nyx brought calm, Eris brought motion. Where Nyx walked like the tides of eternity, Eris moved like a spark in gunpowder. She was the imbalance in balance. She was the tension before the storm. She was the crack that forms before the mountain breaks. Eris looked upon the vast emptiness, and instead of peace, she felt boredom. She felt restlessness crawling under her skin. She hungered not for destruction, but for reaction, for movement, for the raw electricity that occurs when two things clash. And so her first laugh echoed across the young universe. It was a thin, sharp sound, like a blade drawn across stone. It sliced through the quiet night had woven. Thanatos paused. Hypnos stirred. Even dreams trembled. For the first time, the void shivered. Eris had arrived, and the cosmos would never again know perfect stillness. Eris drifted through the void like a spark caught in eternal wind. She did not walk as her siblings did. She did not glide like her mother. She moved in sudden bursts, appearing, disappearing, changing direction as if following a rhythm that no other being could hear. The young universe, still forming its laws, felt her presence like a shiver through its bones. Where she passed, the stillness cracked. The silence broke. The darkness vibrated with unfamiliar tension. But Nyx, ancient and immeasurable, watched her daughter with unreadable eyes. She did not fear Eris. She did not restrain her, for Nyx understood a truth older than the gods themselves. Creation cannot exist without disturbance. Order is meaningless without disorder, and harmony cannot be born without discord. Eris was not a mistake. She was not a curse. She was a necessity, the spark required to ignite reality. The gods that came before gods, before Olympus, before the Titans, before even the foundations of the world were laid. The primordials ruled not like kings, not like queens. They ruled by simply existing. Their bodies were concepts. Their minds were forces. Their presence was law chaos, night, darkness, earth, love, void. They were not personalities. They were fundamental truths. But Eris, she was different. Where her siblings represented natural states, sleep, death, dream, Eris represented reaction, the explosive interaction between states. Not even Nyx could predict her. And that made the cosmos nervous. Thanatos, silent and pale, observed her with cold indifference. To him, Eris was noise, alive, unpredictable, unnecessary. Hypnos avoided her. To sleep, she was a storm that refused to settle, a restless energy that disrupted peace. Morpheus feared her. Dreams thrive on shapes, symbols, illusions, but Eris was raw sensation, movement without form, a force that scattered visions into dust. Eris found their discomfort amusing. She laughed at death's silence, drifted circles around sleep's still figure, and scattered dreams with a careless flick of her hand. But this laughter masked a truth, one she did not yet understand. She was lonely, born into a family that feared her, into a cosmos too young to handle her energy. She wandered the early universe with an emptiness deeper than the darkness she came from. She didn't desire destruction. She desired engagement, connection, the thrill of friction between beings that could truly challenge her. Yet, in the early ages, nothing could, not yet. The first stirring of order, from the silent depths of chaos came the first hints of structured creation. Stars began to flicker like newborn sparks. The fabric of existence tightened. Shapes formed, slowly, hesitantly, inside the endless void. Eris felt the universe changing, and she did not like it. The stillness was returning. Patterns were forming. Order was crawling across the cosmos like vines trying to choke her fire. She struck her hands through the softness of the early stars, watching them tremble under her touch, but they did not shatter. Not yet. The laws were stabilizing. The universe was growing stronger. Eris paced through the cosmic dark, restless, irritated, gleaming like a star on the edge of explosion. Why was everything becoming so peaceful? Why was everything settling? Why was there harmony? She hated harmony. Harmony was boredom wearing a pretty face, and so she whispered into the universe, a whisper sharp enough to cut space itself. Move. A ripple spread, a vibration, a tremor in the quiet structure of early creation. It was the first echo of discord ever heard. and the cosmos flinched. The primordial reaction. The tremor did not go unnoticed. From deep under the layers of creation rose Gaia, the embodiment of Earth solid, ancient, grounding. Her presence calmed storms and stilled shadows. Gaia looked upon Eris with eyes wiser than mountains. "You disturb the shaping," she said, voice slow as tectonic drift. "Be still, little one, the cosmos must form." Eris tilted her head. "Why?" she asked simply. "Because without form, life cannot come." "Without movement," Eris replied, "life cannot change." The words were not spoken with defiance. They were spoken with pure truth, truth that only chaos can understand. Gaia did not argue, for even she recognized the paradox. Eris could not be removed without shattering balance. Her presence was both threat and necessity. Gaia left with a heavy sigh, and Eris smiled, a smile thin as a blade. She had learned something that would define her for eternity. The universe needed her, even if it pretended not to. And so Eris's journey began, a journey that would shake gods, shatter empires, and ignite wars that shaped the fate of mortals and immortals alike. Eris drifted farther from Nyx's shadow, exploring the newborn universe as it stretched itself like a waking giant galaxies curled into spirals. Stars ignited. Celestial dust gathered into the skeletons of worlds not yet finished. Eris watched these formations with a strange mixture of fascination and irritation. Everything was so predictable. Matter obeyed laws, stars followed patterns. Even the swirling chaos of early galaxies had a rhythm, a silent dance choreographed by forces older than creation. Eris hated dances where every step was known. She wanted the unexpected. She wanted the unscripted. She wanted the shock of something that did not follow rules. So she reached out her hand toward a forming star, a bright, pulsing mass of gas and light. The star shuddered at her touch. Its light flickered, its shape warped. Its heart beat faster, as if panicking. But then the cosmic order regained control. The star stabilized, defying her influence. Eris narrowed her eyes. The universe was resisting her. Something deep within her flared, a fierce, glowing spark of identity. This cosmos, this growing machine of patterns and structure, was trying to deny the one thing she embodied: chaos, impulse, disruption, strife. It wanted her quiet, it wanted her still, it wanted her to become another obedient concept in the cosmic hierarchy. But Eris was born from night, from a mother older than stars, and she refused to be tamed by newborn laws. She whispered again, this time harsher. "Remember me." The star cracked, a thin fracture of light slicing across its surface. A gasp ran through the cosmos. A shockwave rippled across young space like a first heartbeat, stuttering out of rhythm. The universe trembled. Something had gone wrong. Something had gone Eris. The first name spoken in the early ages, there were no tongues, no language, no voices. There were only forces. But even forces could communicate in ways beyond sound. Gaia felt the tremor. Tartarus, deep beneath reality, recoiled. Even ether, the light of the upper air, dimmed for a moment. Nyx felt it most of all. She turned her ancient face toward the disturbance. Her shadowed form stretched across a horizon that did not yet exist. The primordial mother whispered one word into the void, a word that resonated like thunder through the newborn fabric of existence. Eris. It was the first time the universe heard her name, and the universe remembered it. From that moment onward, whenever conflict stirred, whenever balance trembled, whenever tension rose like a brewing storm, the cosmos felt her presence. The other primordials take notice from the swirling depths of creation. Another figure awakened. Erebus, primordial darkness, twin of Nyx. His presence was heavier than silence, a suffocating calm that swallowed light. He regarded Eris with eyes blacker than the void between galaxies. "You unsettle the realms," Erebus spoke, his voice like a cavern swallowing sound. Eris floated before him, defiant. "They were too still," she answered. "Stillness is needed," Erebus replied. "And so is disruption," she said, tilting her head, "or nothing new can ever happen." Erebus studied her. He did not speak again, but something changed in his expression. A faint flicker of respect, or perhaps recognition. He understood what Gaia had understood. This small, restless goddess would one day influence everything, for better or for ruin. The young goddess of disturbance. As ages passed, ages without sunrises or sunsets, for time itself was still learning how to flow. Eris grew stronger. Not in size, not in shape, in concept. The more the cosmos settled, the more order wove itself into existence, the sharper her essence became. She realized something profound. Her power did not come from destruction. Her power did not come from harm. Her power came from tension. The invisible thread pulled taut between forces. Wherever there was balance, she could unbalance it. Wherever there was peace, she could spark action. Wherever there was harmony, she could turn the slightest whisper into a storm. She was not a creator. She was not a destroyer. She was a catalyst, a force meant to move the unmoving, a force meant to awaken gods, a force meant to change empires. She had no throne. She had no worship. Not yet. But she had something more potent. Purpose. She drifted into the cosmic dark, eyes gleaming like two shards of early starlight. She did not know the Olympians would one day fear her. She did not know kings would tremble at her whisper. She did not know an apple, golden and innocent, would one day topple an entire civilization. For now she only knew this: the universe was far too calm. And she was born to correct that. As the newborn universe expanded, something strange began to happen. Forms awakened, shapes took personality, cosmic forces began to think, to feel, to desire, and one by one, like flames igniting on an endless dark plane, the first emotions were born: gratitude, fear, wonder, reverence. These emotions drifted through the early cosmos like floating embers, and some of those embers began to gather near powerful beings. They gathered around Gaia, for mortals yet unborn would depend on Earth for life. They gathered around Ether and Hemera. For beings would one day need light and day, they even gathered near Erebus. For darkness is as sacred as light. But when these early sparks approached Eris, when the first flickers of reverence drifted toward her like timid fireflies, she turned away. The sparks dimmed. The cosmos shivered. For the first time in existence, a god rejected the very essence of devotion. Eris' voice echoed through the vast celestial dark. "Do not worship me." The embers trembled, confused. Divine beings, even primordials, instinctively fed on reverence, on the energy of attention and acknowledgement. Not because they were needy, but because worship helped define their place in the cosmic hierarchy. But Eris? Eris refused. Not out of pride, not out of anger, but because devotion required peace, stability, certainty, all things she despised. Worship is order. Worship is routine. Worship is the same ritual repeated again and again, unchanged, predictable. Eris was born to shatter patterns, not become part of one. She whispered, her voice thin as a blade sliding across silk. "I do not want temples. I do not want offerings. I do not want prayers whispered in fear or respect. I want movement. I want reaction. I want the spark between forces when balance breaks. And with that, the drifting embers of worship dissolved, scattering back into the universe like dust caught in a storm. The cosmos had never seen such a thing. A god who did not hunger for followers. A goddess who refused a throne. A primordial force who rejected the entire structure of reverence that would one day define the Olympians. The cosmos responds. Gaia observed from afar, concerned. "Little one," she said gently. "Worship stabilizes gods. Without worship, they fade." Eris smiled, a smile both beautiful and unnerving. "I do not wish to be stable." Erebus rumbled like distant thunder. "You defy the nature of divinity." "I defy everything," Eris answered softly. And it was true, she did not want temples filled with chanting voices. She did not want statues carved in perfect stone. Those things would bind her, limit her, define her. Eris wanted to remain undefined, the unpredictable variable in the cosmic equation. She wanted to remain free. The gods begin to fear her words spread through the primordials. Not spoken, but felt through the fabric of the cosmos. The young goddess of disturbance was unlike any force ever born. Death did not disobey his nature, sleep did not question his purpose, dream did not resist his role. But Eris refused everything. And when a being refuses definition, refuses worship, refuses cosmic identity, that being becomes dangerous. Not because she seeks destruction, but because no one, not even the primordials, can predict her. Eris drifted through the forming stars, her aura crackling like a storm, waiting for a reason to strike. In her silence, she carried a truth she didn't yet understand. A god who refuses worship cannot be controlled, and a god who cannot be controlled will terrify those who crave order. This terror would one day echo in Olympus itself. But that is a story for later chapters. For now, in the quiet, trembling early universe, a new truth took shape. Eris was free, and nothing in creation could bind her. Eris drifted across the early cosmos, her movements sharp and unpredictable, like lightning deciding where it wished to strike. She had no throne, no realm, no altars. She belonged to no empire, no pantheon, no structured hierarchy, but the universe was changing. The primordials were settling into their dominions. Gaia thickened into the first foundations of Earth. Aurea rose, mountains taking shape like colossal sleeping beasts. Pontus stirred, the sea's first heartbeat trembling in the void. Light and darkness began to weave patterns. Time tested its first steps. Order grew stronger, and Eris felt something unfamiliar. Pressure. As if the universe itself was trying to push her into a role she never asked for. A shape she did not want. A definition she refused to accept. She curled her fingers, feeling tension gather in the space around her. Tension. Yes, that was her element. Not destruction, but the invisible energy created between opposing forces. The cosmos was beginning to form rules, boundaries, predictability. Eris pressed her hand against the invisible wall of forming order, and the wall trembled. The universe shuddered as if recognizing her touch. A small crack appeared. It was harmless, barely a flaw, barely a deviation, but it was enough for the cosmos to learn a terrible truth. Wherever there is order, Eris can break it. She inhaled, fascinated. The crack expanded with a low hum, spreading thin silver fractures through the cosmic pattern. She smiled, not cruelly, not wickedly, but with the satisfaction of a musician hearing the first note of a new symphony, a symphony only she could conduct, the first conflict. Two forces drifted nearby, Ether, glowing bright and full of pride, and Erebus, deep and heavy as eternal night. They had always existed in balance, light beside shadow, brightness beside void. They never touched, never collided, never fought. But as Eris passed between them, the crack in the cosmic pattern widened. Ether brightened suddenly. Too bright. Erebus deepened, swallowing more light than usual. The two forces stirred, confused, agitated, pressured by an invisible tension neither could understand. Ether flared. Erebus recoiled. Conflict, pure, ancient, natural conflict, was born. Ether hissed, a sound like a star exhaling in rage. Erebus rumbled, a growl that swallowed echoes. For the first time since creation began, two primordials clashed. Not out of desire, not out of purpose, but because Eris had passed between them. She did not cause the conflict. She revealed it. She amplified it. She let the imbalance express itself. That was her true nature. Not destruction, but revelation. The unearthing of what lies hidden beneath peace. And as Ether and Erebus battled, the first storm of divine tension rippled across existence. Worlds shook. Light trembled. Darkness twisted. The fabric of reality, still soft, still newborn, strained under the pressure. Eris watched with silent fascination. This was not cruelty. This was not malice. This was purpose. The universe had been born sterile, static, predictable, but with conflict, with tension, with struggle. Creation evolved. This clash of early gods was crude, unrefined, raw as a baby's first cry. But to Eris, it was beautiful. The first spark of a truth she would one day master. Nothing changes without conflict. Nyx intervenes. The shadows thickened. The darkness deepened. A calm cold swept over the swirling chaos. Nyx arrived. Her presence alone was enough to silence Ether's light and still Erebus's trembling depths. She lifted her hand, and with a single gesture, the clash ceased. The universe steadied. Eris drifted beside her, unbothered. Nyx regarded her daughter with unreadable eyes. Eyes older than galaxies, older than order, older than chaos itself. "You did this," Nyx said softly. Eris did not lie. "I revealed it." "The cosmos is not ready," Nyx warned. "It must be," Eris replied. Nyx studied her for a long moment, her form flickering like an eclipse in slow motion. "You are different from my other children," Nyx said at last. "You are not a boundary. You are not a necessity. You are a challenge." Eris tilted her head. "A challenge to what?" "To everything." Nyx's shadowy form towered above the young goddess, but Eris did not shrink back. "Be careful, little spark," Nyx murmured. "If the cosmos comes to fear you, it may try to erase you." Eris smiled a small, fierce smile. "Let it try." When the universe learned to fear after the clash, the cosmos did not forget. Light dimmed slightly whenever Eris approached. Darkness thickened around her like wary mist. Even the forming laws of nature, gravity, time, motion, seemed to ripple uneasily when she drifted too close. She was not hated. Not yet. She was recognized as the force that could turn order into storm, peace into tension, balance into imbalance, a force with no throne, no worship, no allegiance, a force that refused to be shaped, a force destined to one day unsettle gods, topple kings, and whisper into the ears of empires. Eris floated in the dark and felt the universe tremble. For the first time, she understood. They fear me because I cannot be controlled. And in that fear, she found her power. After the first clashes between Ether and Erebus, Eris began to wander closer to the emerging Earth. Mountains and oceans were not yet formed. Continents existed only as soft, trembling shapes in the void. The air was thin, filled with raw potential, still unshaped by law or purpose. Eris's presence was not gentle. Where she passed, the ground trembled, dust swirled, and energy quivered. She did not intend to destroy, but the raw potential of creation responded to her like a flame to wind. The young earth writhed beneath her fingers, as if questioning her right to move among it, and yet she belonged. Because in every pulse of creation there existed tension, and Eris was the master of tension. The first tug of chaos on Earth. Gaia sensed the disturbance immediately. The earth whispered to her, the mountains shivered, the rivers shifted, and the air itself felt heavy. But when she focused, she did not see destruction. She saw patterns bending, lines of possibility being rewritten before they could stabilize. Eris smiled. Her energy was like music she could not resist, notes of potential vibrating through the world. She traced invisible lines along the forming land, nudging rivers one way, tilting mountains another, sending gusts of wind across yet-to-be oceans. Nothing was broken. Everything was rearranged. This subtle chaos would later ripple through mortal ages, guiding the placement of empires, the flow of rivers, the rise of civilizations, though none of those who came after would ever know her hand had moved them. The first sparks of strife among the primordials. But Eris's influence did not go unnoticed. Gaia's deep voice rumbled across the young world. You play with forces you do not yet understand. I understand more than you think, Eris replied, drifting lightly above the forming mountains. Her voice was soft, almost musical, yet it carried a weight no force could ignore. Pontus stirred, the first seas awakening beneath the shaping lands. They feel unrest, the ocean whispered. They sense your presence. And they should, Eris said, tilting her head. Restlessness is the first step toward life. Without discord, nothing grows. Without challenge, nothing awakens. Gaia's shadow stretched across the landscape, her patience deep as the soil beneath. You are dangerous, little spark. The balance of all things can crumble under you. Eris laughed softly, a sound like sharp silver striking stone. Then let it crumble, then let the world learn what it means to move. The first mortal possibility. Though mortals had not yet been born, Eris could already sense their potential. Small, fragile, imperfect creatures would one day inhabit the lands she now stirred. And when they came, they would inherit a world shaped as much by her discord as by Gaia's patience. She imagined the conflicts that would one day burn in human hearts. Wars between kingdoms, battles for power, jealousies whispered behind closed doors, betrayals whispered in shadowed corridors. Each spark of discord would be her gift to them, not out of cruelty, but out of inevitability. For without tension, no story unfolds. Without strife, no destiny is written. The universal truth Eris discovered. As she drifted among mountains, oceans, and skies yet unformed, Eris realized something crucial. Her power was not in destruction. Her power was in potential, in influence, in reaction, in the tiny twist of fate that shifts the path of an entire civilization. Even gods, immortal, powerful, unyielding, could not resist the subtle tug of her presence. Every disagreement, every tension, every argument born of misunderstanding or fear was her domain. And she smiled, knowing her influence was eternal. The young universe, still forming, learned its first lesson. Chaos is not a force to be feared. It is a force to be felt, and it is inevitable. The seed of the golden apple. Deep in the shadows, Eris began to sense the possibilities of a future yet unborn. A future where mortals would honour gods with rituals and gifts, where empires would rise and fall, where pride and jealousy would rule hearts and destinies. Her mind, bright and restless, caught on a single thought, one spark, one small object, one seed of conflict, and everything could change. It was an idea, a concept, a whisper of destiny. The tool of her influence would be subtle, indirect, and devastating. She would wait. She would watch. And one day the world would know her name not just as chaos, but as the goddess whose touch ignites strife. As the young earth continued to take shape, Eris's presence was like an invisible wind, unseen yet undeniable. She did not claim dominion over mountains, rivers, or skies. She did not seek praise from the elements, nor allegiance from the stars. She moved quietly, subtly, leaving ripples that only the patient or perceptive could notice. But even subtle movements in creation carry consequences. The first observers. From the highest reaches of the forming cosmos, the other primordials watched Ether. The first light stretched his glow across newborn landscapes. He shimmered nervously, sensing Eris's influence. Erebus the darkness coiled its immense presence, ready to absorb any excess tension. Nyx, ever watchful, lingered in the shadows, observing the spark she had birthed. And yet, no one could predict her next move. Eris existed in a space between inevitability and chaos, a wild card in the very laws of reality. She observed the earth. She noted the cracks forming in mountains, the rivers carving unexpected courses, the first tremors that hinted at life yet unborn. Each imperfection was her signature, a whisper of discord that would echo through history. The first mortals foretold. Though humans had not yet arrived, Eris felt the faint stirrings of their potential small, fragile creatures that would inherit her world. Creatures whose lives would be ruled as much by conflict as by survival. She imagined their disputes. Kingdoms divided by pride, families torn by jealousy, wars born of desire for power. Each spark of strife was her gift. Each act of rebellion, each whispered betrayal, each subtle insult or misjudged decision would become a thread in the tapestry of human destiny. And through it all, Eris would remain unseen, but her influence unmistakable. She was the silent hand that nudged events, the invisible whisper that sowed tension, the unpredictable variable in a universe that craved order. The first tool of discord. Eris began to conceive a method, a symbol that could carry her influence across time. It would not be weapons or armies, it would not be storms or earthquakes, it would be simple, beautiful, and irresistible. A single object, small in form but mighty in consequence, something that could inspire jealousy, something that could ignite desire, something that could fracture unity. She envisioned it, golden, perfect, shimmering, tempting. Even the thought of it made her pulse with anticipation. For in this object lay the seed of the greatest chaos she would ever wield, one that could touch gods, kings, and mortals alike, one that would forever link her name with strife, conflict, and destiny. The first impact on the primordials. Eris's movements and influence did not escape the notice of the older gods. They began to sense patterns in her chaos, small fissures in their realms, subtle tensions where none had existed before. Ether flared, annoyed by the disruptions. Erebus recoiled, uncertain of what would happen if her spark grew too strong. Even Gaia, the patient mother, could feel the tremors of her influence beneath the forming earth Nyx watch silently, allowing her daughter to test boundaries. Because Nyx understood the truth that no other god could. Without Eris, the universe would remain stagnant. Without her, growth would be impossible. Without discord, life would never awaken. Eris smiled, knowing she had already begun to shape destiny. The mortals, the gods, the cosmos itself, all were part of a dance she was only beginning to conduct. The promise of chaos. And so, as the earth stabilized, mountains rose, rivers flowed, and the first hints of life began to stir. Eris drifted through the forming skies, her mind alive with possibilities. She did not need worship. She did not need temples. She did not need prayers. She only needed reaction. For she had learned a profound truth. Chaos is not merely destruction. It is the force that moves everything forward. It is the spark that ignites life, the tension that shapes destiny, the whisper that awakens the gods. And in that quiet, infinite space, Eris smiled, for she knew her journey had only just begun. The universe was still young, yet already she could see the patterns of the future. She could see how her whispers would travel through the hearts of mortals, through the minds of gods, through the bones of empires yet unborn. She was not yet feared. She was not yet understood. But one day all would learn her name, Eris, the goddess of strife, the goddess of discord, the goddess who refused worship, the catalyst of chaos. And the world would never be the same. The universe had grown restless under her touch. Mountains had risen in unpredictable formations. Rivers flowed where no river should have flowed. The wind whispered secrets of tension into the unborn world. And yet, in all of this, there was no destruction, no chaos for its own sake. Eris's influence was subtle, invisible, but undeniable, like a pulse beneath reality itself. The cosmic lesson. The primordials observed quietly. They understood in fragments what Nyx had always known. Eris was different. She was not bound by loyalty, by reverence, by law, or even by fear. She existed as a spark between forces, a living tension in a cosmos that had never known such energy. Where other gods would demand worship, Eris demanded only reaction. Where other gods sought control, she sought only movement. And where other gods represented permanence, she embodied change. The universe learned its first lesson. Balance is fragile, harmony is fleeting, and the smallest spark of discord can echo across eternity. The seed of future strife. Even as the earth took shape, Eris began to contemplate the distant future. She could feel the faint heartbeat of humans yet to be born, kingdoms yet to rise, empires yet to crumble. She imagined the small moments that would define mortal lives. A jealous glance, a whispered betrayal, a rivalry born of pride. She imagined how these threads of tension could grow into wars, into conflicts that would shape history. And she smiled, knowing her influence would span the mortal world, divine politics, and the fate of empires. The first golden seed of discord had already been conceived, a concept she would one day manifest in the physical world, a tool that could spark the greatest conflicts in history, the golden apple of strife, the first fear of the immortals. Though mortals did not yet exist, even the gods sensed it. The whispers of tension travelled across the cosmos. Ether, Erebus, Gaia, they all felt the invisible pull of Eris's influence. And Nyx. Nyx alone understood the truth. Her daughter would not be tamed, she would not be caged, she would not be silenced. And the world, gods and mortals alike, would one day fear her. But for now the universe was young, and Eris moved freely. A shadow in the light, a flicker in the darkness, a whisper in the wind. The goddess of discord had awakened, and her journey had only just begun. The universe had aged, though only slightly. Stars burned brighter, planets spun in slow arcs. Life had not yet claimed the earth, but the stage was set for the first stirrings of civilization. And Eris drifted like a shadow across the growing world, unseen but always present. Where she passed, fissures appeared in the ground, rivers twisted unexpectedly. Forests swayed before the wind had even blown. She did not intervene to destroy, but she nudged ever so gently the natural world toward conflict, tension, and imbalance. This was her art, not to create outright chaos, but to awaken the potential for strife, long before mortals would set foot on the soil. The birth of early civilizations in the fertile valleys and along the winding rivers, the first human settlements began to form. Tiny communities clustered for protection, for survival, for warmth. They were fragile, naive, unaware of the invisible goddess who hovered just beyond their senses. Eris watched them. She saw pride taking root in hearts not yet hardened by experience. She saw ambition flicker like embers in young eyes. She saw jealousy forming quietly between neighbors who once shared everything. And she smiled. For the first time, her whispers could reach mortal minds, not as words, not as vision, not as sound, but as feeling. A subtle unease, a lingering tension, a small spark that could grow into disagreement, rivalry, or rebellion. The first kingdoms and Eris touch. Among these early settlements, the first rudimentary kingdoms arose. Rulers claimed territories by strength and wit. They built walls of mud and stone. They hoarded resources and protected secrets. And yet, Eris noticed the cracks already forming. A king's pride would challenge a neighbouring ruler, a commander's ambition would rival a king's wisdom, a servant's envy would fester, poisoning loyalty. She did not guide them, did not intervene. She merely observed, letting her invisible hand tug at threads that were already fraying. The first wars were not yet fought, but their seeds were planted. The first betrayals had not yet been whispered, but the desire for betrayal existed in the air, and all of it bore her mark. The whisper of strife. Eris began to speak softly to the hearts of mortals, not with words but with instinct, with intuition, with tiny impulses. Why should he have more than you? Is she not your rival? Do you deserve what they claim as theirs? These were not commands, they were suggestions, subtle nudges, seeds of doubt that could grow into full-grown conflict. And the humans, still young, still untested, felt them without understanding. They began to squabble. They began to challenge authority. They began to desire what they could not reach. And in that moment, Eris laughed softly, a sound like silver slicing through stone the empires that would fall. Eris's influence stretched beyond villages and valleys. She hovered over rivers, mountains, and forests that would one day become the sites of mighty cities. She whispered into the hearts of kings, warriors, and scholars alike. The first civilizations would rise with her invisible guidance, great empires built on ambition, pride, and rivalry. And every empire, no matter how powerful, would one day crumble, because strife had been woven into its very foundation. Eris was patient. She did not rush. She did not need to. For the universe had taught her one truth. Chaos is inevitable. Discord is eternal. And where there is power, there will always be conflict. the invisible queen of strife. By the time the first temples and cities took form, mortals were worshipping gods they could see, gods of sun, gods of harvest, gods of death. But none of these gods commanded fear or respect, quite like Eris did, because they could not see her. They could feel her. They could sense her influence. They could hear her whispers in their hearts, even when they bowed to other deities. She was a goddess without a temple, a goddess without a name in their prayers, a goddess who did not seek worship. And yet, she ruled over them more potently than any mortal god could. The promise of future wars. Eris drifted through the valleys of early civilization, her presence undetected but ever shaping destiny. She could already see rivalries that would erupt into battles, alliances that would crumble under pride and jealousy, lovers torn apart by suspicion, kings betrayed by the very men they trusted most. Every empire that rose would bear her invisible signature. Every civilization that thrived would have its shadow of strife, and in her dark joy she whispered to the cosmos itself, "Let them struggle, let them fight, let them desire and betray, for in strife life awakens and I endure." The universe had grown older, though only by the measure of cosmic patience. Stars burned in steady arcs. Planets had hardened into spheres of possibility. Rivers and mountains settled into their courses. The first kingdoms of mortals had taken root, and Eris, ever restless, ever unseen, moved like a shadow between them. Her touch was subtle, not destruction, not violence, only the tension of potential, the quiet whisper that could turn ambition into jealousy, loyalty into betrayal, harmony into discord. But for the first time, her influence drew attention, not from mortals, but from the gods themselves. The chains of fate begin to stir the fates. Clotho, Lachesis, and Atropos watched with interest and unease. The threads of destiny, spun from their divine fingers, had grown taut. Some were woven with care, some with randomness, but all had a rhythm, a pattern. And now they felt a strange pull, a disturbance in the strands they believed eternal, a subtle tremor in the weave of fate. "Do you feel it?" Clotho whispered. Her hands never stopped spinning the thread of life. "Something is interfering, something unseen." Lachesis narrowed her eyes. "The threads are twisting in ways I cannot foresee." Atropos, ever silent, merely frowned. Even she could feel the ripple of discord creeping through the strands like smoke through a darkened hall. It was Eris, the goddess of strife, the unseen catalyst, the unpredictable variable. For the first time in the history of creation, the fates had recognized a force they could not control. The immortals begin to fear her word, or perhaps sensation spread among the gods. Ether flickered nervously. Erebus shivered at her invisible touch. Gaia remained patient but wary, feeling the tension Eris seeded in the hearts of mortals and gods alike. Even the younger Olympians, though not yet fully awakened, felt tremors of unease. They had not encountered a being whose influence was so subtle, so total, yet impossible to pin down. Nyx observed quietly, as always, her shadowed eyes reflecting both pride and concern. "You have grown far beyond your infancy," she murmured to her daughter. "Even I cannot fully anticipate your reach." Eris only smiled. She had never sought control. She had never sought worship. She only wanted reaction. The movement, the tension, the friction that gave life its depth. And yet, the gods feared her. The first attempt to bind her. It began with whispers in Olympus's earliest forms, and among the primordials who still roamed the universe. Eris must be restrained, a voice said. Unchecked she will unravel all we have built, another replied. Plans were whispered in shadows, chains of cosmic intent were considered. Some gods proposed traps of golden light, others suggested binding her to a single domain. Still others wanted her erased entirely, erased from memory, removed from the weave of reality. But the one truth that all feared to admit was obvious to Nyx. No chain could hold Eris. No trap could bind her. No spell could contain a force born of night itself. The first gods to fear her most among the immortals, three in particular felt the weight of Eris's presence. Ether, god of light. He shone with clarity and order, believing in patterns and predictability. Eris's subtle discord unnerved him. He hated that something so small and unseen could disrupt the radiant balance he cherished. Erebus, lord of darkness, though vast and unknowable, even Erebus recoiled at the tension Eris caused. His depths, usually calm and absolute, twisted under her invisible hand, a reminder that nothing, even the void, was immune. The fates, Clotho, Lachesis and Atropos had spun threads for ages without interruption. Now the threads shivered in ways they could neither predict nor control. This instability frightened them. Even they, masters of destiny, recognized the uncontainable spark of Eris. Together, these immortal forces represented the first organized fear of the goddess of strife. For the first time, a being existed who could bend gods without touching them, who could shape mortal and immortal fate alike without so much as a gesture. Eris's response to fear. Eris, aware of the divine whispers and unseen plans, felt no anger, no malice, only amusement. Fear was a form of attention. Attention, even reluctant, confirmed her influence. She drifted through the cosmos like a quiet storm. The fates tugged at threads, trying to stabilize mortal destinies. Ether flared, attempting to illuminate shadows. Erebus deepened, attempting to absorb tension. And Eris? She whispered into the spaces between. Tighten your threads, shine your light. Swallow your darkness. It will not stop me. It cannot stop me. Her voice was a mere ripple in the cosmos, but the effect was undeniable. Every god, every mortal, every strand of destiny shivered under her influence. The chains of fate. Twisted by her, the fates tried to intervene, subtly redirecting the threads of destiny to prevent her interference. They wove stronger patterns. They reinforced paths of loyalty, of obedience, of peace. And yet, wherever Eris passed, the threads bent. Loyalty twisted into suspicion. Obedience became prideful defiance. Peace shifted toward tension. Clotho muttered in frustration, these threads were meant to endure, yet she bends them without touch or gesture. Lachesis added, even subtlety is a weapon in her hands. Atropos, ever silent, finally spoke. She is not evil. She is necessary. But even necessity can terrify. The first mortal consequences. Though the gods debated, the mortals of the early kingdoms already felt her influence. Small rivalries grew. Neighbours quarrelled over land. Leaders doubted their allies. The first wars were not yet fought, but the seeds were planted. Eris smiled quietly. This was her domain, the invisible hand that shapes destiny. She did not strike directly. She did not conquer. She simply set the stage. Every future battle, every betrayal, every dispute traced back to her quiet whispers. And every time a god tried to intervene, they only made the threads of fate more tangled, more vulnerable to her touch. The beginning of divine strategy. The gods realized something crucial. Eris could not be fought as one fights a mortal enemy. She could not be bound as one binds a wild beast. She could not be bargained with, bribed, or persuaded. Their solution, unspoken but universally understood, was patience and observation. They would watch, they would measure her influence. They would attempt to understand her patterns, if patterns even existed. But Nyx, her mother, knew better. Do not attempt to control her, she warned. She is not a thread to be tied. She is the hand that tugs at all threads. And even the fates cannot restrain her. The universe has given her purpose, and purpose cannot be caged. Eris heard these words as if whispered in the wind. She smiled, because she knew her power was not in fear, not in worship, not in obedience. Her power was in inevitability. Wherever there was balance, she would introduce tension. Wherever there was peace, she would plant doubt. Wherever there was loyalty, she would spark betrayal, and the gods, even the immortal gods, would tremble under her subtle hand. The kingdoms of mortals were fragile, like glass barely hardened by the fire of survival. Early rulers, untested by time and unshaped by history, grasped for control over lands, peoples, and rivals, and though they could not see her, Eris hovered over them, her presence like a shadow brushing across the mind, stirring doubts, ambitions, and fears. Her whispers were subtle. Why should he rule more than you? She claims what is yours. Will your loyalty be rewarded or betrayed? She didn't speak aloud. She did not need to. The mortals felt the tension, and it was enough. The first kings to fall under her influence. In one fertile valley, a young king named Lycaios claimed dominion over several villages. He was ambitious but insecure. He trusted no one fully, not his advisors, not his generals, not even his closest kin. Eris leaned close, unseen, and whispered to his heart, "He envies you, he plots. Will you let him surpass you?" And Lycaios began to doubt his brother, his most trusted general. He questioned every decision. He punished minor mistakes with harshness. He sowed suspicion where none existed. The people whispered, "The king has changed. Something dark moves within him." Yet none could see the goddess who guided his doubts. None could know the invisible hand of discord shaping their lives. Divine observers and strategies. Far above the mortal kingdoms, the gods observed. Ether glared, shining brightly, trying to illuminate truth and loyalty. Erebus recoiled, uncertain how to counter a goddess whose influence twisted both light and dark. The fates tugged their threads in vain, attempting to redirect the spiraling paths of destiny. Nyx, patient and knowing, spoke to her daughter in the shadows. "You test the balance too strongly. Even I cannot protect you if they seek to bind you completely," Eris replied softly, her voice like wind through the cracks of stone. "They fear me, Mother Good. Let them fear me. Fear is attention. Attention is power." The first divine countermeasures. The gods attempted subtle interventions. Ether sent visions of loyalty and obedience to the kings of mortals. Erebus whispered in the night to calm ambition and jealousy. Even the fates tried to tighten the threads, reinforcing harmony and obedience. But wherever divine influence clashed with Eris's subtle whispers, conflict arose. The king grew impatient, the generals grew suspicious, and advisors began to argue. Even when gods attempted to restore order, their interference magnified the tensions. Eris smiled quietly, knowing that direct intervention often amplified her power, turning order into friction, harmony into struggle. The spread of discord. Kingdom by kingdom, village by village, Eris's presence spread like a slow ripple across the earth. Her influence reached even those who were not yet rulers. Children quarrelled over games, neighbours argued over grazing lands, artisans competed for commissions. The seeds of jealousy, rivalry, and ambition took root early. Mortals began to whisper of a strange restlessness in their hearts, a desire they could not name, a doubt that would not leave. A tension that seemed larger than their small mortal lives. It was the first mortal echo of Eris's influence, subtle, invisible, but eternal. The gods who grew anxious. The more Eris influenced the mortals, the more the gods feared her. Aether complained, "Why does her touch unsettle even the most loyal of men?" Erebus added, "She moves without touch, without action, yet the effects are absolute." Clotho, weaving the threads of destiny, murmured, "Even the smallest action she inspires creates ripples across life. The mortal world bends to her whispers." Lachesis, tugging at another thread, said, "We must observe carefully. If she grows unchecked, even the Olympians will struggle to maintain order." Atropos, silent but decisive, allowed her scissors to hover over a thread, trembling slightly. Even she felt the weight of Eris's invisible hand. Eris and the First Temptations. One day she observed a young woman named Kyrene, a promising leader in a nascent settlement. Kyrene was kind, loyal, and just. Her people loved her. Her advisors trusted her. Eris's whisper was gentle. "What if they do not deserve your loyalty? What if they betray you? Are you not stronger than them?" Kyrene hesitated. She doubted her most trusted ally. She questioned her own judgment. And though she acted with integrity, a subtle fracture appeared, a small tension that would one day grow into mistrust. This was Eris's true gift. She did not break mortals outright, but she planted the seeds of struggle. The first signs of godly fear in mortal wars. As kingdoms expanded, minor skirmishes became more frequent. Rival kings, influenced unknowingly by Eris, began to clash over borders, resources, and pride. Advisors whispered treachery. Soldiers doubted their leaders. Even gods who attempted to maintain balance found their interventions producing unintended consequences. Eris watched silently. She did not incite violence. She did not wield armies. She only stirred ambition, jealousy, and pride, and the mortal world became her stage. The gods, too, grew anxious. Their attempts to restrain her influence revealed a truth they could not ignore. Eris could not be controlled. And the more they tried, the stronger her impact became. The fates struggle with her influence. The fates convened in the shadowed spaces of the cosmos. Threads of life stretched before them in a chaotic tangle. More complex than ever, Clotho spoke first. She bends destiny without effort. Even we cannot predict her touch. Lachesis frowned. If we interfere too directly, we risk magnifying her influence. If we do nothing, mortals will crumble under her subtle guidance. Atropos finally cut a thread lightly. We cannot control her. Perhaps we should guide the consequences instead. Let destiny unfold around her hand. Even the fates, masters of life and death, understood that Eris's influence was beyond containment. The gods learned to fear innovation and change. The young gods of Olympus, though yet to fully awaken, felt the invisible tremors of her influence. They sensed ambition in rulers who should have been loyal. They noticed strife among families who should have been united. And they began to whisper among themselves, "Who is this goddess who moves without action, who disrupts without touch?" "She is Nyx's daughter," one said. "She is the goddess of strife," another replied. "She will test the boundaries of fate itself." a third whispered, and fear spread even among the immortals who had once believed themselves untouchable. Eris' patience and strategic influence. Eris did not act in haste. She did not push mortal kings to rebellion in a single day. She didn't drive gods to madness in one moment. Instead, she waited. She observed. She whispered. She planted seeds of doubt, tension, and rivalry. Every mortal conflict she touched would grow over years, decades, centuries. Every divine concern she inspired would linger, shaping councils, alliances, and strategies. Every empire she influenced would carry the signature of her unseen hand. Her patience was her weapon. Her subtlety was her shield. Her inevitability was her strength. The stage is set for future chaos. By the end of this period, kingdoms were restless. Mortals questioned loyalty. Kings doubted friends. Advisors whispered of betrayal. Soldiers feared their leaders. Kings doubted friends. Advisors whispered of betrayal. Soldiers feared their leaders. The gods for the first time acknowledged their fear of an immortal they could not see or touch. Even the fates, with their unerring control of destiny, admitted defeat in subtle ways. Eris's influence had become inescapable, threading through mortal and divine realms alike, and she remained unseen. She remained unbound. She remained, above all, inevitable. The kingdoms of mortals were now poised on the edge of conflict. Borders were claimed. Alliances formed and broken. Rivalries whispered through the halls of palaces. And all of it, though unnoticed, carried the subtle fingerprints of Eris, the goddess of strife, the catalyst of discord, the invisible hand that shaped destiny. Though she had long moved unseen among mortals and gods alike, one day she decided to act in a manner that would mark the beginning of her legendary influence, the first divine test of mortality. Eris had watched a particular region of fertile valleys where three neighbouring kingdoms thrived side by side. The rulers were ambitious, proud, and untested. They had not yet been hardened by battle, nor tempered by loss. Yet all three coveted the same stretch of land, a plateau rich with water, forests, and grazing animals. Eris's whisper was subtle, almost imperceptible. Why should he have more than you? Do they not underestimate your strength? Will you allow them to take what is rightfully yours? And slowly, imperceptibly, tension took root. The kings began to doubt their neighbours. They suspected betrayal. They interpreted minor disagreements as signs of conspiracy Ether observed, flaring his light to illuminate truth and prevent discord. Erebus deepened shadows, attempting to absorb the tension. The fates tugged threads to restore harmony. And yet, Eris's influence prevailed. She was subtle. She was patient. She was inevitable. The spark of conflict. It began with a minor quarrel over trade routes. Merchants from one kingdom accused another of deceit, of overcharging for grain and livestock. The kings met to mediate, each suspecting the other of foul intent. Councils whispered, generals argued, and advisors began plotting in secret. Eris did not act directly. She did not strike or demand. She merely allowed natural ambition, envy, and fear to guide events. And when the first skirmishes erupted along the borders, it seemed like fate, chance, or human pride. No one suspected the invisible goddess smiling from the shadows. The gods react. When the first blood was spilled, the gods grew anxious. Ether's light flared in frustration. Why does she allow mortal folly to flourish unchecked? I sought to illuminate the truth, yet they still doubt one another. Erebus recoiled, uncertain whether his shadows could counter the subtle power of Eris. Even the fates tugged their threads harder, attempting to prevent disaster, yet the tapestry only grew more tangled. Nyx, watching silently, reminded the gods, "She is not cruel. She is necessary. Strife is the forge of life, the crucible of destiny. You cannot contain her, nor should you try." But even Nyx could not foresee the full impact of Eris's subtle orchestration. The first legendary act. It was during a midsummer gathering that Eris made her first famous mark. The three rival kings convened, hoping to negotiate peace. The air was tense, but the outcome might have been peaceful, if not for a single, small object. From the heavens, Eris let a golden apple fall, shimmering with impossible light, landing in the centre of the council hall. On it were inscribed the words, "To the fairest." The kings stared, confused and fascinated. Each wondered who was intended. Each believed it might be them. Flattery, jealousy, and ambition stirred instantly. Old grievances returned to mind. Imagined slights became fuel for anger, and the council erupted into accusations and insults. The mortal world had never seen such a subtle yet powerful catalyst. It was not a weapon, not a curse, not a decree of gods. It was pure suggestion, perfected into a physical token of desire and envy. Eris, watching from above, smiled. This small act would ripple through generations, shaping mortal conflict, inspiring myths, and demonstrating the power of subtle discord. The gods' fear grows when the immortals observed this act. Fear deepened. Ether flared angrily. How can one object, one simple token, unsettle kings and councils so completely? Erebus muttered. She bends mortal hearts without touching them, and now she manipulates perception itself. Even the fates, with their unerring control over destiny, found threads tangled in ways beyond comprehension. The golden apple, though small, had altered alliances, created suspicion, and sparked the first great disputes that would be remembered for generations. Nyx watched silently, knowing this was just the beginning. Her influence is no longer theoretical. She has acted, and the consequences will echo forever. The ripple effect on mortals. The kings, enraged and humiliated, left the council hall in anger. Alliances shattered. Betrayals were whispered. Wars, once avoidable, now seemed inevitable. Soldiers prepared for battle, generals plotted coups, and advisors whispered venomous suggestions in eager ears. All of it traced back unseen to a goddess who required no army, no throne, no temple. All of it was her doing, silent, subtle, and absolute. The first legends of Eris's golden apple began to spread. The mortal kingdoms whispered of a mysterious object, a divine temptation, a catalyst for conflict. Her influence would be remembered, feared, and mythologized for generations. Divine policies formed, the gods convened once more, their fear now mingled with awe. "We cannot bind her," Clotho said, tugging at threads of destiny that writhed like serpents. "We cannot fight her directly," Lachesis added, eyes narrowing at the invisible forces that disrupted their work. Atropos finally spoke. "Perhaps the universe needs her. Perhaps even we cannot dictate balance perfectly. Let her act, but watch, guide consequences where you can." Ether sighed, his light dimming slightly. She moves without effort, without attention. Even the fates struggle to anticipate her influence. Erebus merely recoiled into the shadows, realizing that darkness itself could not contain her subtle brilliance. The lesson for the cosmos. Eris's first legendary act taught the gods a profound truth. Discord does not require force. Strife does not require armies. Influence, subtle and persistent, can shape destinies more completely than direct intervention. From that day forward, mortals remembered the golden apple as a symbol of jealousy, pride, and rivalry. But the gods knew its deeper truth. It was the first tangible evidence of a goddess who refused worship, yet ruled hearts and fates invisibly. And Eris drifted above the world, content, unseen, patient, knowing that the chains of fate themselves had bent to her will. The stage set for the future. The kingdoms, though small, were now entangled in conflicts that would endure for generations. The gods, even the fates, had begun to fear a power they could neither predict nor contain. And the goddess of strife, eternal, patient, and invisible, had proven the subtle might of her influence. She did not need temples. She did not need prayers. She did not need worship. All she needed was reaction. And the world, mortal and divine alike, had responded. Eris had awakened in legend and action. And history, from that day to the farthest reaches of mortal memory, would never forget her name. The air over Olympus shimmered with divine anticipation, though none yet knew the source. The gods had gathered in their earliest halls, golden columns stretching into the sky, terraces overlooking mortal lands. It was a time of celebration, of revelry, a banquet in honour of immortal unity. Music echoed across the heavens, laughter mingled with the scent of ambrosia, and the wines of eternity flowed freely. But Eris was absent. Not by choice nor by neglect, but because her influence required no presence. For the goddess of strife did not need to sit among the gods to be felt. She was in the subtle tension between them, the unspoken jealousy that flickered in every glance, the ambition that lingered in every heart. And soon, the golden apple would arrive. The invitation of chaos. No mortal could have imagined the scene. The gods themselves believed the feast was perfect, an unbroken tapestry of harmony. Yet Eris, with quiet amusement, drifted in the margins of existence, a shadow between joy and suspicion. She did not knock. She did not demand entry. She let curiosity, pride, and the desire for recognition do the work for her. Through unseen hands she conjured a single golden apple, flawless in its glow, inscribed with 3 simple words: "To the fairest." A hush fell, though no voice had spoken. The apple appeared on the central table, gleaming with impossible light, reflecting the faces of all who beheld it. And suddenly, the banquet, once a symbol of divine unity, became a stage for inevitable discord. The gods who reached for it. 3 goddesses, each luminous, each proud, felt the unspoken challenge. Hera, queen of the heavens, her authority unquestioned yet fragile in the eyes of ambition. Athena, goddess of wisdom, revered for intellect and strategy, yet harbouring pride in her clarity and insight. Aphrodite, goddess of beauty, whose charm enchanted gods and mortals alike, yet whose vanity found reflection in every glance. Each looked upon the golden apple and wondered, is it for me? Am I the fairest? Their eyes flickered subtly toward one another. Each saw in the other a rival, a challenge, a threat to recognition and honour. And Eris smiled. She did not need to speak. She had only to offer temptation. The whisper of discord. The apple's power was not magic in the way mortals understood. It was psychological inevitability, a subtle amplification of pride, vanity, and desire. Surely the others cannot surpass me, Hera thought. Is wisdom not my right? Athena whispered silently. Beauty is mine, unmatched, Aphrodite imagined. The tension grew in the hall like a storm gathering over calm seas. Even the other gods, the men of Olympus, noticed the change. Laughter faltered. Conversation stalled. eyes darted in suspicion. The golden apple was a simple object, yet in it Eris had distilled the essence of strife, competition, and envy. The first conflict among gods. The hall fell into subtle chaos. Hera stepped forward, regal and commanding. "Surely this apple honours the highest among us." Athena, calm but sharp-eyed, replied, "Wisdom must be recognised above mere titles, even among immortals." Aphrodite's laughter rippled through the hall, light and dangerous. "Beauty is the measure that rules both gods and mortals. Surely it is mine to claim." And with that, the first divine argument erupted, a quarrel subtle, whispered, yet magnified by Eris's invisible hand. Other gods tried to mediate, but the tension was now self-sustaining. Eris, unseen, drifted among them like a gentle breeze before a storm. She had no favourites, she had no agenda. She needed only reaction, and the gods, in their pride and vanity, responded eagerly. The invisible strategist. Mortals often think of chaos as violent and loud. Eris knew better. True chaos was subtle, true strife was inevitable, a force magnified by the smallest spark. The golden apple was her masterpiece, not because it demanded attention, but because it revealed truth. Even immortals, beings of infinite power and knowledge, were vulnerable to desire, envy, and pride. Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite, though divine, couldn't resist its pull. They debated, bickered, and accused one another, each seeking recognition, each demanding validation. And every moment of discord was Eris's triumph, a testament to her subtle genius. The consequences spread beyond Olympus. The mortal world began to feel tremors of this divine quarrel. Kings and queens, already ambitious and suspicious, found their rivalries mirrored in the heavens. Wars, alliances, betrayals, all began to take shape across mortal kingdoms, as if the gods' subtle tension had filtered down through the threads of fate. Soldiers and generals, sensing unrest in their rulers, questioned loyalty. Farmers, noticing disputes over taxes and borders, whispered rumours that spread like wildfire. Even artisans and merchants argued, jealous of each other's skill, prosperity, and recognition. All of it traced back, though invisibly, to Eris's cunning intervention, the gods' fear and realisation. The immortals themselves began to recognise the scope of Eris's power. Ether flared with irritation. "She does not strike, yet she commands attention, more absolute than any army or decree." Erebus whispered in the shadows. "Light and dark are alike in her presence. Even the threads of destiny bend." The fates, tugging at the mortal threads, discovered countless paths of strife now unavoidable. Even they, masters of destiny, realized the simple golden apple had altered the course of gods and mortals alike. Nyx, from the shadows of eternity, watched her daughter with pride and caution. "You have begun to write your legend, but beware, child, for even divine envy can ignite consequences beyond imagination." The first divine council in crisis. The argument between Hera, Athena, and Aphrodite escalated. Other gods attempted to intervene, but each suggestion became an opportunity for further discord. "Surely wisdom should prevail," said one god, trying to guide Athena. "Honor is the measure," another insisted, supporting Hera. "Charm and beauty dictate fate," a third offered, whispering toward Aphrodite. And so the first divine council fractured, not through violence, but through pride, desire, and perception. Eris observed silently. She had not touched, moved, or spoken. She had only offered temptation, and the gods had done the rest. The air over Olympus trembled with tension. The golden apple resting at the centre of the feast seemed to pulse with invisible energy. 3 goddesses, Hera, Athena and Aphrodite, gazed upon it, each certain in her claim, each unwilling to yield. Their pride clashed silently, a storm gathering before the first thunder. Eris, unseen, drifted between them, a shadow in the brilliance of Olympus. She needed nothing more than observation. Her delight came from anticipation, subtle influence, an inevitable reaction. The other gods whispered among themselves, debating how to mediate, yet every word, every suggestion only fueled the flames. The need for mortal judgment. Ether, god of light, spoke first, his voice firm yet hesitant. Perhaps a mortal should judge this matter, one untouched by immortality, and thus impartial. Erebus, deep and shadowed, frowned. A mortal, would they comprehend what is divine? Nyx's eyes glimmered with ancient wisdom. They will not comprehend fully, but their choice will reflect humanity itself, pride, envy, desire. The apple's power will extend beyond Olympus. And so a decision was made. Though subtle and reluctant, a mortal prince would be summoned, someone of insight, fairness, and courage to judge the fairest among the goddesses. The selection of Paris. In the distant kingdom of Troy, a young prince named Paris lived in quiet obscurity. He was handsome, clever, yet untested by the trials of power. Eris's whispers, subtle as ever, nudged the threads of destiny toward him. "You will be chosen," her voice murmured in the wind. "The gods themselves will look to your judgment. Do not fail them, or fail yourself." And so it came to pass that Paris was selected, not by choice, but by the subtle currents of fate manipulated by Eris. A journey was arranged, divine guidance and whispers paving the path to Olympus. The meeting with the goddesses. Paris stood before the 3 goddesses, the golden apple between them. Hera radiated authority, demanding recognition of her sovereignty. Athena, calm and calculating, argued that wisdom must determine the prize. Aphrodite smiled, her beauty radiant, promising gifts beyond mortal imagining. Eris did not speak, yet her influence was palpable. The apple's magic worked silently, amplifying desire, vanity, and doubt, shaping the mortal prince's perception. Paris considered each goddess carefully. He weighed beauty against wisdom, power against desire. Eris's invisible hand guided subtle thoughts, nudging him toward decisions that would echo through history. The promises of goddess and the fate of kingdoms. Hera spoke, her voice commanding, "Choose me, and your city shall gain kingship and wealth unmatched." Athena's tone was calm, precise. "Select me, and wisdom and strategy shall guide your people to victory and glory." Aphrodite, with a soft smile, whispered, "Choose me, and the woman you desire most shall be yours, a prize of love and beauty beyond imagining." Paris hesitated, caught between desire, prudence, and ambition. Eris's subtle influence nudged him, desire over duty, temptation over reason. And so he made his choice. He handed the golden apple to Aphrodite, the beginning of legendary strife. The consequences were immediate, subtle yet irreversible. Hera, enraged, vowed vengeance. Athena, slighted, retreated with quiet wrath. Aphrodite, triumphant, smiled, her promise binding Paris to mortal and divine consequences alike. Even the other gods, observing, understood the magnitude of this seemingly simple choice. Eris had orchestrated it perfectly. A single apple, a mortal's judgment, and a storm of jealousy, pride, and ambition was unleashed. The ripple effect on mortal kingdoms. Paris's choice did not remain confined to Olympus. Troy, now favoured by Aphrodite, became a nexus of desire, envy, and ambition. Rival kingdoms observed, suspicious and envious. Alliances formed and crumbled. Wars began to simmer, fueled by ambition, pride, and the subtle whispers of Eris. The Trojan line was forever marked by divine influence, a kingdom entwined with the threads of strife that the goddess had so patiently woven, the first mortal godly wars. The golden apple, though small and subtle, had set in motion events beyond mortal comprehension. Kingdoms competed for power, resources, and influence. Mortal hearts were filled with jealousy, ambition, and desire, mirroring the divine quarrel. Generals, kings, and citizens alike became players in a game orchestrated by an unseen hand. Eris's power had transcended mere whispers. Her influence now shaped history itself. Even the gods recognized her cunning. She had acted without armies, without threats, without temples. Yet kingdoms would rise, empires would fall, and legends would be born because of her subtle guidance. The Feast of Doom's legacy. The banquet in Olympus had ended, but its consequences spread through time and space. The goddesses' rivalry escalated, influencing divine councils and immortal decisions. Mortals became pawns in a game of ambition, desire, and jealousy. Wars were seeded in the hearts of men, the first echo of strife that would endure for centuries. Eris, unseen, drifting between shadow and light, had demonstrated her eternal truth. Chaos is not violence alone. Strife is not destruction alone. Subtlety, influence, and temptation are far more powerful than armies or fire. The golden apple had become a symbol of her triumph, a reminder to mortals and gods alike that even the unseen can shape destiny. The hall of Olympus had quieted, yet the storm Eris had sown raged silently in the hearts of gods and mortals alike. The golden apple, small and radiant, was no longer merely an object. It had become a symbol, a seed, a promise of chaos. Hera seethed in her celestial chambers, plotting vengeance against both Aphrodite and the mortal prince who had dared choose her rival. Athena, her mind sharp as blades, calculated strategies to ensure her wisdom would not be ignored in the unfolding tapestry of events. Aphrodite, radiant and triumphant, whispered promises into Paris's ear, cementing a bond that would ignite centuries of mortal conflict. And above it all, Eris observed unseen, patient, eternal. Her work was just beginning. The mortal world takes shape. Troy, favoured by Aphrodite, began to prosper in subtle ways. Paris, now enchanted and emboldened by the goddess's promise, became a figure of fascination and desire. Rival kingdoms looked upon Troy with envy, alliances wavered. Whispers of betrayal filled the air. The gods' quarrel had become a mortal struggle. The subtle hand of Eris reached across kingdoms, stoking ambition and jealousy in every human heart. Generals prepared for wars they did not yet understand. Kings plotted against neighbours they had once trusted. Citizens whispered rumours of betrayal and ambition, feeding the invisible fire that would one day engulf empires. The first signs of Trojan conflict. Paris's choice set a series of events into motion that would echo for generations. His decision offended Hera and Athena, whose influence extended into mortal kingdoms. Rival princes and kings, sensing divine favour and disfavour, began to manoeuvre for advantage. Alliances formed hastily and dissolved just as quickly, mirroring the strife in Olympus itself. Eris smiled quietly in the shadows, knowing that true chaos required no direct action, only subtle guidance and patient observation. divine strategy and failure. The gods attempted interventions. Hera tried to sway mortal kings with promises of wealth and authority. Athena sent visions of wisdom and strategy, hoping to prevent unnecessary conflict. Aphrodite whispered desire into the hearts of mortals, binding them subtly to her will, yet every intervention only compounded the discord. Where one goddess attempted to guide, another introduced tension. Where one god sought to stabilize, another unknowingly stoked ambition. And all of it was perfectly orchestrated by Eris's subtle hand. Even the Fates, who had once believed themselves unchallenged, struggled. Threads of destiny twisted in ways that were unpredictable, volatile, and inevitable. The Golden Apple and legendary myth. The story of the Golden Apple, though initially divine and subtle, began to spread among mortals. Poets whispered of a mysterious fruit that incited jealousy among goddesses. Kings recounted tales of divine temptation influencing mortal affairs. Warriors sang of conflicts sparked by pride, beauty, and desire. The legend of Eris's apple became a cautionary tale. It reminded both mortals and immortals that even the unseen could wield extraordinary power. Even the smallest object, when imbued with meaning and desire, could shape destiny itself. The long-term consequences. The mortal kingdoms, already restless, were now caught in a web of ambition, envy, and subtle divine manipulation. Rivalries escalated into open conflict. Alliances became fragile and fleeting. Mortals acted as though destiny itself had shifted beneath their feet. All the while, Eris remained unseen, unchallenged, and patient. She did not need worship. She did not need temples. She did not need armies. She had only to plant the seeds of desire and pride, and the world would respond in kind. The golden apple, though small, had proven her power. Even gods feared her subtle influence. Even the Fates recognized that the threads of destiny were no longer fully theirs to control the final lesson of the Feast of Doom. Eris's first legendary act carried a profound truth. Chaos is not only destruction, it is subtle, pervasive, and inevitable. Strife is not only war, it is envy, desire, ambition, and competition. Influence does not require visibility. It requires patience, subtlety, and inevitability. The gods had learned, though with reluctance, that Eris could not be controlled. Mortals had learned, though without realizing it, that ambition and desire could ignite conflicts beyond comprehension. And Eris? She drifted above the world, silent, eternal, a shadow of inevitability. Her golden apple had not only fractured Olympus, it had sown the seeds of mortal wars, epic tales and legends that would endure for all time. She was not worshipped, yet her influence ruled. She was not adored, yet her legacy would endure. She was Eris, goddess of strife, the invisible hand shaping the destinies of gods and mortals alike. The city of Troy, radiant and proud, stood on the edge of destiny. Its walls, tall and formidable, gleamed under the sun. Its citizens moved with confidence, unaware of the invisible threads already being tugged by powers beyond comprehension. Paris, the young prince whose judgment had favoured Aphrodite, walked the streets with a mixture of pride and trepidation. He had chosen beauty over wisdom and power, and while the goddess kept her promises close, the consequences of his choice were beginning to stir in subtle, unseen ways. Eris, invisible yet omnipresent, observed the city with patience. Her influence spread like a whisper in every heart, mortal and divine alike. She had planted the spark. Now she would watch it ignite into fire, the whispers of ambition. kings and princes from neighbouring realms observed Troy with envy. Hera and Athena, still wounded by the judgment of Paris, subtly influenced the mortal world, planting seeds of suspicion and rivalry among leaders. Troy grows too powerful, one rival king whispered to his council. Their prince has been favoured by the gods, another replied, his voice tinged with unease. Perhaps it is time to assert our own claim, said a third, emboldened by ambition. Even minor disputes, once trivial, became magnified under the subtle influence of divine strife. Farmers quarrelled over fields. Merchants accused neighbours of deceit. Soldiers questioned orders. Eris did not need to strike directly. She only needed to amplify human desire and pride, and the city's harmony began to fray the rise of Helen. Meanwhile, across distant lands, Helen of Sparta, the most beautiful mortal woman in the world, was preparing for her own path in destiny. Her beauty, the very force that had drawn Aphrodite's favour, became the focal point of mortal and divine attention. Eris, unseen, whispered subtly, "She will ignite desire. She will stir envy. And through her, Troy will burn." Helen's arrival in Troy, though orchestrated through promises and manipulation, was the first direct link between mortal desire and divine influence. Her presence alone created ripples of tension in every household, every palace, every council chamber. The first seeds of war. Troy's kings and generals, unaware of the full scope of divine interference, began to prepare for potential conflicts. Alliances were considered, only to be rejected at the slightest hint of betrayal. Rival kingdoms sent emissaries ostensibly to negotiate trade and peace, but subtly to spy, to incite suspicion, and to gather intelligence. Eris's whispers threaded through every conversation, shaping doubt and ambition. Do they plan against you? Will your people betray your trust? Is your rule secure, or will another rise in your place? And the city of Troy, once serene, began to feel the invisible tension of impending disaster. The gods and the mortal connection. The Olympians watched silently, aware that their quarrel had reached into the mortal world. Hera, with her desire for influence and power, encouraged rival kings to challenge Troy. Athena, focused on strategy and foresight, attempted to guide allies toward wisdom, though her guidance often clashed with mortal pride. Aphrodite, radiant and cunning, bound mortals to desire, shaping loyalty and love to her advantage. Even minor gods, less noticed by mortals, whispered suggestions, nudging events in ways they believed would maintain balance, unaware that Eris's patient orchestration eclipsed all other influence. The mortal world, unknowingly, had become a stage for divine conflict, and Troy was the centre of the stage. The spark ignites, the spark that would eventually burn. Troy began as a series of small, almost insignificant events. A quarrel between Greek and Trojan emissaries over trade goods. A slight insult misinterpreted as a grave offence by a Trojan prince. A secret meeting that was discovered, leading to suspicion and betrayal. Each event, though minor in isolation, was magnified by Eris's invisible hand. Every whisper of jealousy, ambition, and desire was amplified. Every doubt, every mistrust, every whispered accusation became fuel for a fire that could not be contained. The stage was set. The spark was lit. And soon what began as whispers and subtle conflicts would escalate into legendary war. The mortals' ignorance of the divine. The citizens of Troy, proud and confident in their city, had no awareness of the divine conflicts shaping their fates. They marvelled at Helen's beauty, celebrated Paris's choices, and defended their city with loyalty and honour. Yet every decision, every action, every emotion was subtly influenced by Eris. Even the bravest warriors, the wisest leaders, and the most loyal citizens became pawns in a game they could not see and could not understand. And above them, the goddess of strife drifted silently, knowing that all the chaos, all the tension, all the envy and ambition would soon converge into a fire that would burn Troy to legend. The gods divided counsel. In Olympus, divine voices argued over the mortal world. Should we intervene? Should we prevent this war? Or let mortal ambition run its course? The fates tugged their threads carefully, but even they hesitated, uncertain whether interference would exacerbate the very strife they sought to control. Nyx, shadowed and patient, spoke quietly to Eris. "Child, your influence has begun to shape history. Mortals and gods alike are bound by your threads." Eris smiled, knowing that patience and subtlety were more powerful than armies and fire. She did not need to fight. She did not need to threaten. She only needed to guide the spark, and the conflagration would take care of itself. The foreshadowing of the Trojan War. As Paris walked the streets of Troy, observing the growing tensions, he felt unease that he couldn't name the city's prosperity, the admiration of its citizens, and Helen's presence all carried an invisible weight. "Something is coming," he thought. "A storm I cannot see, a fire I cannot control." But Eris's whispers, quiet and relentless, assured him, "It is not yet time to fear. Only when the flame spreads fully will the world truly see me." And thus, the spark that would burn Troy began its slow, inevitable spread. Tiny incidents magnified by ambition, pride, jealousy, and desire. Troy's streets, once alive with the laughter of merchants and the chatter of citizens, now thrummed with subtle tension. Every glance carried suspicion. Every word carried weight. Every action was shadowed by unseen influence. Eris had planted the spark, and now the flames were beginning to lick at the edges of mortal lives. Paris, still young and inexperienced, walked through the palace halls. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders, though he did not yet fully understand its source. Helen, radiant and captivating, moved through the corridors, oblivious to the whispers that followed her, the envy that festered, the desire that simmered. And above it all, the gods watched. Some intervened subtly, some seethed in resentment, but none could counter the invisible hand of Eris tensions among Trojan leaders. Even within Troy, the city's rulers felt unease. Councils that had once focused on trade, prosperity, and defense now debated threats and rivalries. "The Greeks are growing bold," a general warned, eyes narrowed. "Our neighbours will take advantage if we show weakness," a minister replied, heart quickened with anxiety. "Paris's affection for Helen blinds him," another whispered, worry and envy mixing in equal measure. Every small disagreement, every hesitation in decision-making became fuel for mounting conflict. Eris's influence was subtle yet absolute, amplifying pride, magnifying suspicion, and fanning the first sparks of war, the first signs of outside intervention. From the Aegean shores, emissaries from Greek kingdoms observed Troy with growing curiosity and concern. Rumours of Helen's beauty had spread like wildfire, stoking envy and desire. Kings debated intervention. Some sought to honour old alliances and treaties. Some desired Helen herself or the prestige her presence promised. Some were swayed by whispers of divine influence, suspecting that the gods favoured Troy. Even among mortals, the strands of fate were tangled. The invisible hand of Eris guided each decision, each hesitation, each whisper. turning minor rivalries into potent seeds of rebellion and conquest. Divine influence amplifies mortal ambition. The Olympians themselves were divided. Hera, still wounded by the judgment of Paris, quietly influenced Greek leaders to oppose Troy. Athena, ever strategic, sought to guide mortals with wisdom, though her efforts often conflicted with Troy's own counsel. Aphrodite, radiant and cunning, strengthened Paris's devotion to Helen, tying his desires to the goddess's subtle plan. Even minor gods whispered in ears, nudging generals and kings toward action that would escalate tensions. No single god could fully control the outcome, yet the threads of fate were now woven with enough friction to ignite disaster. The spark ignites open conflict. It began with a seemingly trivial event, a minor skirmish on the outskirts of Troy. Greek scouts clashed with Trojan border patrols, each interpreting the encounter as deliberate hostility. Horses were startled, supplies miscounted, words misheard. What should have been a minor border dispute became the first flame in a fire that would consume empires. Eris's whispers, silent and unseen, guided reactions. Do not yield. Show strength. Do they doubt your power? Prove them wrong. Let ambition rule your hand and desire guide your choice. The conflict escalated naturally, like tinder catching fire in a dry forest. No one fully understood the force behind it, yet the flames of war were spreading steadily. The roles of heroes and leaders. Troy's heroes and leaders, unaware of the divine strings tugging at their hearts, began to rise. Paris, torn between desire and duty, became both symbol and catalyst. Hector, loyal and fierce, sought to defend the city while struggling with internal doubt. Other Trojan nobles maneuvered cautiously, balancing pride with caution. In Greece, leaders also responded. Agamemnon, ambitious and proud, saw opportunity to expand power. Menelaus, driven by personal desire and honor, prepared to claim Helen by force. Other kings and generals weighed alliances, ego and divine influence, their choices subtly steered by Eris. The stage was set for a war that would eclipse reason, morality and caution. The invisible hand of Eris. Every minor conflict, every whisper of envy, every ambition of mortals was amplified by Eris. A mistrusted messenger sparked outrage in a palace hall. A misinterpreted offer of alliance fueled suspicion and betrayal. A soldier's pride led to disobedience, escalating skirmishes into larger confrontations. And through it all, the goddess of strife remained unseen. She required no temples. She demanded no sacrifices. She needed only reaction, and the mortals provided it eagerly. Her influence was quiet, subtle, yet more powerful than armies or fire. The foreshadowing of epic war. As the first skirmishes erupted, both mortal and divine observers sensed the inevitability. Troy, though proud and fortified, could not withstand the combined forces now assembling. The Greeks, united by ambition, desire, and divine guidance, would soon march. The gods themselves were divided, some aiding, some obstructing, and all wary of Eris's unseen influence. The stage for the legendary Trojan War had been set. The spark had ignited, and soon it would burn brighter than any mortal could comprehend. Eris, in her eternal patience, observed silently. She had done nothing, and yet accomplished everything. The gods quarrelled, mortals fought, and empires teetered, all guided by her subtle, invisible hand. The city of Troy, radiant and proud, was now on the edge of destruction, and the goddess of strife smiled quietly. The city of Troy, once proud and radiant, now stood on a precipice of calamity. What had begun as whispers, small misunderstandings, and subtle jealousies had grown into open conflict. Tension thrummed through the walls, through the streets, and through every citizen's heart. Eris, ever patient, observed from the shadows. She had sown the spark, and now it burned with uncontainable force. Paris, torn between desire for Helen and duty to Troy, felt the weight of destiny pressing upon him. His choice, seemingly personal and private, had rippled outward, stirring ambition, envy, and pride in mortals and gods alike. And the flames of war, once small, now threatened to consume kingdoms and empires. The first battle. It began on the plains near Troy, where Greek forces, marshalled by Agamemnon and Menelaus, met the initial Trojan defenders. The clash was fierce but chaotic, driven as much by pride and mistrust as by strategy. Eris's influence was subtle yet omnipresent. A soldier hesitated, giving the enemy an advantage. A commander misinterpreted orders, resulting in unnecessary casualties. Minor quarrels between allies escalated into open confrontation. Every act, small or large, was magnified by desire, jealousy, and ambition. Human weaknesses Eris understood intimately. The Greeks gained early victories, though Troy's defences remained formidable. Yet even in this success, the seeds of long-term disaster were planted. Anger, vengeance, and pride flourished on both sides. Divine interventions. The gods, unable to ignore the unfolding events, intervened directly. Athena, goddess of wisdom and strategy, guided Greek leaders with insight, sharpening tactics and exposing Trojan weaknesses. Aphrodite, radiant and persuasive, shielded Paris and whispered promises into his heart, ensuring his devotion to Helen remained steadfast. Hera, vengeful and cunning, subtly manipulated Greek leaders, encouraging arrogance and ambition that would later bring tragedy. Even minor deities took sides, whispering into the ears of mortals, inflaming pride, desire, and fear. Yet none of them matched Eris. Her influence required no force, no armies, no strategy. She merely amplified existing flaws, turning human ambition into obsession and mortal caution into recklessness. The heroes emerge. In Troy, heroes began to rise, their valour and ambition shaped by both divine favour and mortal pride. Hector, noble and dutiful, fought to defend Troy, but even his courage could not shield him from the ripple effects of Eris's influence. Aeneas, destined for survival and future legend, displayed both bravery and strategic insight, guided subtly by divine forces. Paris, driven by desire and divine manipulation, became both symbol and target, embodying the spark that ignited war across the Greek armies. Heroes such as Achilles, Odysseus, and Ajax moved with skill, ambition, and pride, qualities Eris magnified to perfection. Every battle, every duel, every act of heroism carried the silent mark of strife personified. The escalation of strife. The war quickly expanded beyond small skirmishes. Trojan villages were raided, minor outposts burned. Greek supply lines were attacked, forcing logistical improvisations that increased tension. Personal vendettas, magnified by jealousy and anger, erupted among soldiers and commanders alike. Eris's whispers echoed everywhere. Strike first, strike hard, show your pride. Do not forgive, do not yield, let envy guide your hand. What might have been a limited conflict escalated into total war, as mortals and gods became entangled in a web of ambition, jealousy, and desire. The role of fate and divine chaos. Even the fates, whose threads had always dictated mortal destiny, were challenged. Eris's subtle manipulations bent mortal choices without breaking the natural course of events. Every decision, while technically free, was influenced by strife, turning caution into recklessness, prudence into pride, and alliances into betrayals. Thus, the Trojan War was not merely a contest of arms, it was a battle of ambition, desire, and divine influence, a conflagration fueled as much by human weakness as by strategy or weapons. The fallacy of control. As battles raged, mortals and gods alike learned a bitter truth. Strategy could guide armies, but could not govern ambition. Strength could conquer, but could not prevent envy. Pride could inspire heroes, but could also destroy them. Even Zeus, ruler of Olympus, observed the unfolding chaos with caution. He saw that the war, once ignited by Eris's golden apple, could no longer be contained by authority or decree. Eris had proven her ultimate lesson. Chaos need not strike with swords or storms. It could rise quietly, invisibly, manipulating pride, envy, and desire, until even the mightiest heroes and the wisest gods were powerless to stop it. The spark becomes flame. As Troy burned with the first battles of what would become a legendary war, families mourned the dead. Princes and kings sought glory and vengeance. Soldiers fought with both courage and desperation. And yet, through it all, no one saw the true architect. No mortal or god suspected that the source of the strife was neither hero nor king, neither army nor blade. The goddess of strife, Eris, watched silently from the shadows, her influence invisible yet absolute. The spark she had planted, the golden apple, the choice of Paris, the envy of goddesses, had grown into a flame, a fire that would consume men, kingdoms, and legends, a fire that would echo across history and immortal tales alike. The legacy of strife. The first battles were only the beginning. Troy, proud and radiant, had ignited a war that would last a decade. The gods, divided and manipulated, had deepened mortal suffering. And Eris, patient and eternal, had demonstrated a truth both terrifying and undeniable. Strife is eternal, chaos is inevitable. Influence is more powerful than armies, and desire more destructive than swords. The spark that burned Troy had become a fire that would never be forgotten. The plains outside Troy were now a theatre of chaos. Dust rose from the feet of soldiers. Swords flashed in sunlight, and the cries of men echoed over the hills. Every clash of armour, every shout, every wound carried the invisible mark of Eris. She needed no armies. She required no weapons. She needed only human pride, desire, and envy, and the mortals supplied them in abundance. The Trojan leaders faced trials. Within Troy's walls, the city's rulers struggled to maintain control. Hector, noble and brave, commanded the city's defenders with unwavering loyalty, yet even he was not immune to Eris's subtle influence. Doubt whispered in his mind. Should he defend a city that risked everything for his brother's choices? Should he trust alliances that could crumble under envy? Every decision carried weight. Every hesitation became a thread in the tapestry of strife. Paris, consumed by desire and divine manipulation, often ignored prudent counsel. His devotion to Helen, strengthened by Aphrodite, blinded him to the rising tensions in neighbouring kingdoms. Even minor arguments in the council chambers escalated, fueled by pride and ambition. Eris's whispers guided these conversations, ensuring that discord would flourish in every corner. The Greeks unite across the Aegean. Greek kings convened to plan their campaign, Agamemnon, ambitious and prideful, sought to assert dominance over all participating forces. Menelaus, motivated by honour and desire, demanded swift action to reclaim Helen. Odysseus, clever and calculating, advocated strategy and patience, though even his insight could not fully counter the influence of the goddess of strife, Eris, unseen and silent, amplified minor disputes among them. You deserve command, they will betray you. Delay is weakness, strike now or lose all. Pride above reason, ambition above caution. The Greek leaders, driven by these subtle manipulations, prepared for war with a mixture of determination, fear, and envy. The first major clashes, Troy and the Greek coalition, met repeatedly on the plains, each engagement escalating in intensity. Scouts misjudged enemy movements, leading to ambushes. Cavalry units clashed in confusion, causing chaos on both sides. Personal rivalries among commanders fueled reckless assaults, leading to unnecessary bloodshed. Eris's invisible hand guided every misstep, magnifying human flaws into strategic disasters. She didn't need to strike herself. The mortals did her work for her, the role of heroes in escalating strife. Heroes emerged as both champions and instruments of chaos. Hector, though noble, sometimes acted on pride, challenging Greek leaders directly and escalating conflicts unnecessarily. Paris, though not a warrior by nature, provoked rivalries by his personal actions and attachment to Helen. Achilles, fierce and proud, responded to insults and slights with devastating force, leaving trails of death and fury. Even their greatest acts of valour carried the shadow of Eris's influence. Bravery became recklessness, courage became pride, and skill became a tool of strife. Divine manipulation deepens. The gods continued to play their roles in mortal affairs, often unknowingly reinforcing Eris's work. Athena attempted to guide warriors strategically, but even her wisdom could be twisted by ambition and pride. Aphrodite ensured Paris's devotion to Helen remained absolute, even as it destabilized alliances and inflamed jealousy. Hera, still envious and vengeful, encouraged Greek leaders to assert dominance, planting seeds of internal rivalry. Even Zeus, observing from above, acknowledged that Eris's influence surpassed mortal and divine control. The spread of desire and envy. Eris's subtle manipulations extended beyond leaders and heroes. Minor soldiers coveted the glory of their comrades, leading to disobedience. Citizens grew anxious over rumours and stories of divine favouritism. Envies among kings, princes and generals widened, creating fractures in command and strategy. Every whisper of ambition, every spark of jealousy, every desire for recognition fueled the conflagration of war. The foreshadowing of tragedy. Amidst the growing chaos, Eris remained patient. She did not need to strike directly. Every death, every betrayal, every act of reckless pride carried her invisible mark. The Trojan War, now fully ignited, would rage for years. Heroes and kings would fall, empires would tremble, and destiny itself would bend under the weight of ambition and desire. And all of it, every tragedy and triumph, would trace back to the golden apple, the choice of Paris, and the quiet whispers of Eris, goddess of strife. The war raged on, its flames fueled by pride, envy and desire. Each day brought new battles, new rivalries, and new acts of both heroism and folly. Yet behind every clash of swords, every fallen warrior, and every shattered alliance, Eris's invisible hand guided the unfolding tragedy. The Greeks, confident after initial victories, grew arrogant. Their pride made them reckless. Their ambition made them blind. Trojans, though valiant and fortified, were plagued by internal discord. Disagreements among commanders, suspicion of allies, and mistrust of messengers created cracks in even the strongest defences. The role of pride and personal ambition. Pride became a weapon as deadly as any sword. Hector, noble but proud, sometimes acted impulsively, challenging Greek forces directly and exposing his soldiers to unnecessary risk. Paris, driven by desire and the whispers of Aphrodite, provoked Greek leaders through his personal actions, escalating tensions further. Achilles, whose wrath and pride were legendary, made decisions fueled more by personal offence than strategy, leaving devastation in his wake. Every personal ambition, every grudge, every desire for recognition became a spark igniting greater conflict. Eris whispered endlessly, subtly. Strike first, do not forgive, let envy rule your hand. Your pride is your weapon, your ambition is your shield. No mortal recognized the source of these impulses. They believed themselves acting freely, yet every choice carried the mark of strife incarnate. The Trojan defences strain under pressure. Troy's fortifications, once impregnable, began to show cracks, not in stone or wood, but in trust and cohesion. Minor skirmishes escalated due to miscommunication among commanders. Spies and traitors, motivated by ambition and greed, spread misinformation. Supply lines faltered, soldiers grew weary, and morale wavered. Even the bravest warriors felt doubt creeping into their hearts. Eris's influence ensured that internal strife weakened the city more than any enemy sword could divine players in mortal strife. The gods, drawn by both curiosity and rivalry, continued to meddle. Athena provided insight to Greek leaders, but her guidance was often twisted by prideful mortals. Aphrodite strengthened Paris's devotion to Helen, deepening Troy's internal complications. Hera encouraged the Greeks to assert dominance, planting seeds of arrogance that would lead to mistakes Eris needed none of this. She let the gods quarrel and maneuver while subtly guiding mortal decisions. Her power lay not in direct action, but in the amplification of ambition, jealousy, and desire, the escalation of warfare. The battlefield became a theatre of both strategy and chaos. Greek formations, influenced by divine guidance and mortal pride, often clashed violently, leading to unforeseen casualties. Trojan sorties, though brave, were sometimes misguided by fear, suspicion, or ambition. Every minor misstep, amplified by Eris, had consequences far beyond the immediate moment. Tactics and valour intertwined with personal pride, envy, and desire, creating a war as psychological as it was physical. The invisible threads of fate. Even the Fates, who had once controlled mortal destinies with precision, found themselves challenged. Decisions made freely by mortals were subtly twisted by strife. Alliances and betrayals were magnified by divine and mortal ambition alike. Every victory carried the seeds of future defeat. Every triumph planted envy and resentment. The war's outcome was no longer determined solely by weapons or strategy. It was shaped by pride, desire, and the subtle hand of the goddess of strife. Foreshadowing the legendary fall, as battles raged across the plains, Troy's fate began to crystallize. Internal divisions grew alongside external threats. Heroes, both Trojan and Greek, demonstrated courage, yet fell prey to ambition and envy. The mortal and divine threads of influence intertwined, ensuring that Troy's eventual destruction was inevitable. Eris, silent and patient, drifted above the war like a shadow over the sun. She had orchestrated chaos with no army, no temple, no worship. Her golden apple, Paris's choice, and subtle whispers of ambition had ignited a conflict that would become legend. The spark that burned Troy was no longer a flicker, it had become a wildfire. Mortals fought, gods intervened, and strife spread across generations and history itself. The plains of Troy were stained with blood, dust, and the echoes of clashing armies. War had become a living entity, feeding on pride, ambition, envy, and desire. Eris's subtle hand guided the flames, ensuring that no action, no matter how small, was free from consequence. Heroes fought bravely, generals commanded decisively, and yet every victory carried the seeds of new conflict. Even Zeus, observing from Olympus, realized that the threads of destiny were no longer fully under his control. The Trojan counterattack. Hector led a daring sortie, striking at a Greek encampment. His strategy was sound, his courage unmatched. Yet subtle miscalculations, minor rivalries among his commanders, and whispers of doubt, sown by Eris, turned the assault into a partial success, at best. Some soldiers ignored orders, acting out of personal pride. Messengers delivered reports misinterpreted, causing confusion and mistrust. Rival commanders debated strategy instead of executing plans, slowing the momentum of Troy's forces. The counterattack showcased both heroism and the destructive power of subtle chaos. The Greek response. Agamemnon, fueled by ambition and divine encouragement, rallied his forces. He struck back with force, hoping to crush the Trojan resistance. Achilles, driven by personal offence and pride, attacked with relentless fury. Odysseus, ever cunning, exploited weaknesses in Trojan formations. Minor Greek generals, influenced by ambition and envy, acted independently, often causing unintended consequences. The Greeks' response, though tactically effective, mirrored the chaos Eris had instilled among the Trojans. The battlefield became a web of conflicting motives, pride, and divine interference. Rather than a simple contest of arms, divine manipulation intensifies. The Olympians played their hands carefully, though none could fully predict the outcome. Athena guided the Greeks, but her counsel was often challenged by human ego. Aphrodite shielded Paris, ensuring his devotion to Helen remained unwavering. Hera, enraged at the insult of Paris's judgment, subtly sowed discord among Greek leaders to stoke ambition and rivalry. Eris required none of this intervention. She needed only human flaws: pride, jealousy, desire. The gods' meddling amplified her influence, making every action more chaotic and every decision more dangerous. The psychological toll of war. The war was no longer simply physical, it had become psychological and spiritual. Soldiers fought bravely, yet fear and envy simmered beneath their courage. Leaders made decisions clouded by pride, mistrust, and ambition. Minor disputes escalated into major battles, and personal rivalries determined the outcome of crucial maneuvers. Eris whispered in the hearts of all, "Let doubt rule, let pride blind, let desire guide your hand." Mortals believed they acted freely, yet their choices were subtly manipulated by the goddess of strife, foreshadowing future tragedy. Even as victories and defeats were claimed, Troy's ultimate fate became clearer. The city's defences remained strong, but internal discord weakened their cohesion. Heroes, despite bravery and skill, were vulnerable to ambition and envy. Every act of hubris, every slighted officer, every impulsive decision contributed to the inevitable fall of Troy. Eris observed silently, patient as ever. She had no need for temples, no desire for worship. Her power lay in the invisible, the subtle, the manipulation of pride and envy, until mortals and gods alike danced to her tune. The legacy of the spark. The spark that burned Troy, ignited by a golden apple and Paris's fateful choice, had grown into a wildfire. The early battles shaped legends and myths that would endure for generations. Mortals acted under divine influence, yet believed themselves free. Gods intervened, yet none could fully control the chaos. Eris had proven that strife, subtle and patient, could wield more power than armies or fire. The Trojan War had begun in earnest, and the goddess of strife smiled quietly from the shadows, knowing that her influence would echo through history, shaping the destinies of mortals and gods alike. The war had now fully engulfed the plains of Troy and the surrounding lands. What began as whispers, ambition, and envy had become relentless, all-consuming conflict. Eris, unseen yet omnipresent, watched as her subtle threads of strife wove disaster into every action, every decision, every heartbeat. Mortals fought with courage, pride, and desperation, but the goddess of strife ensured that their greatest strengths became their greatest vulnerabilities. The rising tide of Trojan suffering. The Trojans, proud and resilient, began to feel the strain of prolonged war. Supplies dwindled as minor raids and miscommunications disrupted logistics. Soldiers grew weary, their morale shaken by constant battles and the loss of comrades. Fear and doubt crept into the hearts of leaders and civilians alike. Even Hector, the city's noblest warrior, felt the invisible weight of Eris's influence. Should he risk his life in a duel, leaving the city vulnerable? Should he trust allies who might betray him out of envy or ambition? Every choice was a balance between duty and the subtle pull of chaos. Greek heroes and their fatal flaws. Across the battlefield, Greek heroes displayed both brilliance and fatal hubris. Achilles' wrath, ignited by personal insult, led to devastating but strategically costly victories. Odysseus's cunning often sowed confusion, even among allies, as ambition and pride clouded judgment. Ajax, powerful and proud, acted with brute force, sometimes ignoring tactical advantage in favour of personal glory. Eris didn't need to guide them directly. She whispered only faintly, amplifying their innate flaws, turning courage into recklessness and wisdom into error. Divine manipulation and mortal consequences. The gods continued to intervene, each in their own interests. Athena sought to give strategy and foresight to the Greeks, but often found her guidance twisted by mortal pride. Aphrodite ensured Paris's devotion to Helen, inadvertently creating internal discord within Troy. Hera, jealous and vengeful, inspired ambition and arrogance among Greek leaders, setting the stage for betrayal and mistakes. Even Zeus observed cautiously, recognizing that the subtle influence of Eris outweighed any direct divine intervention. Every action on the battlefield, every strategic choice, every act of valor now carried the invisible stamp of strife incarnate, the human cost of strife. The battlefield was no longer merely a place of strategy and conquest. It was a crucible of human weakness. Soldiers fought valiantly, yet envy, pride, and ambition dictated their moves as much as orders from commanders. Minor disputes among allies led to miscommunication and disaster. Families mourned the dead, even as new battles demanded their sons, husbands, and brothers. Eris's whisper was in every act. Do not forgive. Do not hesitate. Let pride and envy guide you. And the mortals, believing themselves free, unknowingly followed her invisible hand. The foreshadowing of long-term tragedy. Even in victory, the Greeks paid a price. Even in defense, the Trojans suffered. Every success planted the seeds of future disaster. Every act of pride and ambition added fuel to the unquenchable fire of strife. Alliances grew strained, betrayals multiplied. Heroes became targets of envy, leading to dangerous rivalries. Cities burned and families suffered, all under the quiet orchestration of Eris. The goddess of strife needed no armies. She needed no temples. Her power lay in the amplification of ambition, desire, and envy. And through her, history itself would be rewritten in blood and legend. The legendary fallout begins the Trojan War, though still in its early decades of legend, had now entered a phase of relentless escalation. Small victories carried heavy costs. Heroic deeds were shadowed by personal flaws and rivalries. Mortals and gods alike were caught in the web of Eris's influence, their fates intertwined with pride, desire, and strife. Troy, radiant yet flawed, was now truly on the edge of destruction. The spark that Eris had planted, the golden apple, the choice of Paris, the envy of goddesses, had grown into a firestorm. It would rage for years, consuming all in its path, leaving only legend and ruin behind. The war had entered its relentless rhythm, a cycle of valor, ambition, and bloodshed. Troy's walls stood firm, yet the city's spirit trembled under the weight of unending conflict. The Greeks, though bold and determined, were equally caught in the snare of pride and envy. And above it all, Eris, the goddess of strife, watched with quiet triumph, her invisible hand guiding every heartbeat and every sword stroke, the irreversible momentum of war. The battles, now countless, had solidified patterns of tragedy. Minor conflicts escalated into major clashes due to pride and miscommunication. Heroic acts often provoked retaliation, igniting cycles of vengeance. Alliances were strained, betrayals multiplied, and both sides became entangled in a web of ambition and jealousy. The war was no longer simply a contest of arms. It had become a living embodiment of strife itself, fueled by mortal flaws and divine interference. Even the bravest leaders felt powerless against the momentum. Hector's courage was tempered by doubt, Paris's passion by envy, and Achilles' wrath by personal offence. Every decision, every battle, every loss carried the indelible mark of Eris's subtle influence. Divine observers and their limitations. The gods, divided and often opposed, tried to intervene, yet none could fully control the unfolding chaos. Athena offered strategies to guide Greek forces, yet human pride often subverted her wisdom. Aphrodite preserved Paris's devotion to Helen, perpetuating internal discord. Hera manipulated ambitions among Greek leaders, igniting rivalries that magnified mistakes. Zeus, ruler of Olympus, observed with caution, recognizing that even divine authority could not fully restrain the goddess of strife. Eris required no divine intervention herself. She merely amplified flaws, desires, and jealousies, letting mortals and gods act as instruments of chaos. The human cost reaches its height. The battlefield, already a stage of devastation, now bore witness to tragedies both immense and intimate. Families mourned their sons, husbands, and brothers lost in battle. Soldiers' ambition led them into reckless assaults, creating unnecessary casualties. Rivalries among heroes and commanders intensified, leaving no room for unity or wisdom. Through every act of courage and folly, Eris whispered, "Let pride blind, let envy rule, let desire destroy." No mortal recognized the origin of this invisible hand. Every choice, every misstep, every triumph and defeat was subtly orchestrated by the goddess of strife herself. the beginning of legendary consequences. By this stage, the foundations of Troy's legendary fate were fully established. Early victories and defeats had set patterns that would dictate the decade-long siege. Mortals' pride and ambition ensured that mistakes would multiply, tragedies would deepen, and vengeance would fuel new battles. Divine interventions, though powerful, only magnified chaos, ensuring that even gods could not stabilize the situation. The spark of the golden apple, the envy of goddesses, and Paris's fateful choice had ignited a firestorm that now consumed all reason, moderation, and foresight. Eris triumph Eris, patient and eternal, achieved her ultimate goal. She demonstrated that chaos needs no temple, no army, no direct force. Mortal desire, ambition, and envy became instruments of her power. Even divine beings with all their authority and might could not counter her subtle manipulation. Through the Trojan War, Eris's influence would echo through time. Her golden apple had set events in motion, but her triumph lay in the invisible threads she wove into every choice, every action, every betrayal. The spark that burned Troy had now become a fire beyond control. Mortals fought, gods intervened, and strife reigned supreme. The legendary fall of Troy was no longer a possibility. It was inevitable, guided by the quiet, patient, and eternal hand of Eris, goddess of discord. The war had settled into a grim rhythm, a relentless tide of blood and ambition. Years had passed since Paris's fateful choice, since the golden apple had sown the seeds of discord among goddesses and mortals alike. Troy's walls, once proud and gleaming, bore the scars of countless battles. The plains surrounding the city were scarred with trenches, camps, and the echoes of clashing armies. Yet amidst the carnage and heroism, one presence remained unseen but undeniably potent. Eris, goddess of strife. No mortal could see her, no temple could contain her, and no offering could sway her. She walked invisibly among the armies, whispering in hearts, guiding ambition, stoking envy, and amplifying desire. The invisible general Eris needed no army, no banners, no swords. Her battlefield was human hearts, and her victories were measured not in land taken or men slain, but in the subtle unravelling of unity, loyalty, and reason. A soldier's hesitation could cost a life. A general's mistrust could turn a triumph into disaster. A hero's pride could lead to a fatal overreach. She required no recognition, no worship, merely action. Every swing of a sword, every whispered insult, every ambitious thought fed her power, and the armies of both Troy and Greece, though mighty and disciplined, were her unwitting instruments. The psychology of strife. Years of warfare had transformed mortals into instruments of chaos. Eris worked not in grand gestures, but in subtle nudges. A glance, interpreted as insult, could ignite personal rivalries. Rumours of divine favour could twist judgment. Minor slights and jealousies among soldiers became sparks for larger conflict. No strategy, no plan could withstand the cumulative weight of subtle, persistent strife. Even seasoned commanders found themselves reacting to forces they could not name. Every victory carried consequences. Every success contained the seeds of its undoing. Heroes under Eris's influence. The greatest mortals of the era were not immune to her subtle hand. Hector, the noble defender of Troy, acted bravely but sometimes allowed personal pride to cloud judgment. Paris, guided by desire and Aphrodite's whispers, provoked both mortals and gods, ensuring new conflicts would arise. Achilles, swift and formidable, let wrath dictate actions, often escalating battles unnecessarily. Odysseus, cunning and perceptive, sometimes fell prey to envy and rivalry, allowing discord to spread even among allies. Eris did not force their actions. She amplified their weaknesses. She transformed courage into recklessness, strategy into obsession, and loyalty into competition. Divine observers and their frustrations. The Olympians, though powerful, struggled to contain the chaos she had sown. Athena tried to guide mortals towards strategy, yet her wisdom was often twisted by human pride. Aphrodite protected Paris's desires, unknowingly prolonging conflict and internal discord. Hera stoked ambition in Greek leaders, inflaming rivalries and encouraging mistakes. Even Zeus, the king of gods, acknowledged that Eris's subtle influence often outweighed direct divine intervention. The goddess of strife required no armies, no storms, no thunderbolts. Her battlefield was the human heart, and in that arena, she reigned supreme. The strategic chaos of years. The war dragged on, not through overwhelming force, but because every decision was clouded by ambition, envy, and fear. Supply lines failed due to mistrust and minor miscommunications. Scouts misreported enemy movements, escalating skirmishes unnecessarily. Soldiers acted on personal ambition, disobeying orders and creating chaos in even the most disciplined units. Every minor error, amplified by Eris, reshaped the battlefield in ways mortal leaders could never fully control. Victory and defeat became intertwined, and the line between triumph and disaster blurred the personal cost of strife. The human toll of years of war was staggering. Families mourned their sons, husbands, and brothers lost in endless battles. Soldiers carried the burden of guilt for acts done in anger, pride, or envy. Leaders grappled with choices, knowing that even a single misstep could doom thousands, Eris whispered in hearts, invisible yet constant. Do not forgive, do not hesitate. Let ambition guide your hand, let envy rule your eyes. Mortals believed they acted of free will, but every choice carried the imprint of strife incarnate, the escalation of conflict. Eris's influence ensured that no period of calm could last. Skirmishes between patrols could ignite full-scale engagements. Minor personal conflicts among leaders could provoke entire units into battle. Jealousies, ambition, and pride perpetuated cycles of retaliation. Even when Greek and Trojan armies paused for rest, the seeds of chaos continued to grow, ensuring that no strategy, however brilliant, could achieve lasting peace. The legendary dimension of war. By this stage, the Trojan War was not merely a conflict between mortals, it had become legend itself, shaped by human ambition and divine manipulation. Every battle, every duel, every act of heroism carried both mortal and divine consequences. The subtle influence of Eris ensured that victories were Pyrrhic, that successes contained the seeds of future tragedies. The interplay of pride, ambition, and envy guaranteed that the war's shadow would stretch far beyond the battlefield. Mortals and gods alike were caught in her web, unable to fully discern the invisible threads guiding their fates. The unseen architect of chaos, Eris, in her eternal patience, demonstrated a terrifying truth. Chaos needs no army. Strife requires no temple. Influence without recognition is more powerful than power wielded openly. The goddess moved silently among mortals and gods, shaping history not with force, but with subtlety. Every fall, every betrayal, every misjudged act was her work, yet none suspected her presence. The shadow of war, long and unyielding, stretched across Troy and the Greek lands, and within it, Eris reigned supreme, the silent general of a battlefield no mortal could escape. The battlefield stretched endlessly, dust rising from the feet of thousands, the clang of metal striking metal echoing across plains scarred by war years of conflict had hardened warriors. Yet even the strongest hearts were not immune to Eris's invisible influence. Her whispers, subtle yet relentless, guided every act of pride, envy, and ambition. The first skirmishes of the day were often minor, almost incidental. A misread order, a delayed messenger, a glance misinterpreted as insult, these small sparks, magnified by Eris, ignited full-scale clashes. No mortal, no matter how wise, could predict the consequences. Duels of heroes. Heroes on both sides now engaged in duels that were as much psychological as physical. Hector, champion of Troy, faced Greek warriors with unmatched courage. Each victory he claimed, however, stoked rivalries among his allies as younger warriors sought glory and recognition. Eris whispered, "They envy your honor. Let their jealousy guide them into mistakes." Achilles, swift and merciless, sought personal vengeance as often as strategic advantage. Every act of wrath inspired fear in enemies, but also fueled rivalry and discord among his own ranks. Eris's influence ensured that even triumph could lead to future tragedy. Paris, though not the strongest fighter, provoked duels through desire and pride. His devotion to Helen, reinforced by Aphrodite, drew enemies to challenge him, and every act of arrogance or defiance fanned the flames of war. Even minor skirmishes between soldiers became illustrations of human ambition and divine interference, magnified by the goddess of strife. The invisible hand of Eris did not wield weapons or command armies. Her power was subtler. A commander's misjudgment turned a small advantage into disaster. Personal rivalries among officers escalated into reckless assaults. Soldiers, motivated by envy and desire, acted impulsively, often sealing their own fates. She whispered in every heart, "Strike first, hesitate and lose, let ambition blind your reason." No mortal saw her, no god could fully counteract her influence, yet her presence was felt in every mistake, every betrayal, and every act of hubris. Divine interference amplifies chaos. The gods, ever watchful, continued to meddle, sometimes in ignorance, sometimes in rivalry. Athena guided Greek strategies, but her counsel was often ignored by those blinded by pride. Aphrodite protected Paris, ensuring his devotion to Helen would continue to provoke war. Hera fanned ambition among Greek leaders, inflaming jealousy and rivalry. Zeus, ruler of Olympus, watched cautiously, realizing the subtle power of Eris could not be constrained even by him. Thus, every human action, every minor victory or failure became a web of consequence, magnified by mortal flaws and divine intervention alike. The human toll grows. Years of relentless conflict took a devastating toll on both sides. Soldiers, weary and disillusioned, became reckless in battle. Families mourned in Troy and Greek lands, yet new generations of warriors replaced the fallen. Leaders wrestled with strategy and morality, knowing that even the wisest decisions could be undone by human envy or ambition. Eris thrived in this environment. Her whispers, quiet yet persistent, ensured that the war's shadow lengthened with every passing day. The escalation of strife. Small events unnoticed in isolation became catalysts for greater tragedy. A Greek patrol misinterpreted a Trojan movement, leading to unnecessary bloodshed. Jealousy among Trojan commanders caused confusion and missed opportunities. Minor misunderstandings between allies escalated into full-blown confrontations. Each incident reinforced the power of Eris. Where armies could have stood united, ambition and envy created fractures. Where leaders could have coordinated, pride caused division. Where mortals could have paused, desire pushed them into chaos. The shadow of legend. By now, the Trojan War had grown beyond a mere mortal conflict. It had become a legendary struggle shaped as much by divine interference and human flaws as by swords and shields. Every duel, every skirmish, every strategic misstep carried consequences that echoed far beyond the battlefield. The subtle influence of Eris ensured that victory was rarely simple, that success contained the seeds of future catastrophe. Mortals and gods alike acted within the shadow of her power, often unaware that the goddess of strife guided their fates. The battlefield itself seemed alive, shaped by ambition, envy, and the invisible threads of chaos. Eris's triumph was silent yet absolute. No temples were built in her honor, no sacrifices were made to appease her. And yet, in every act of human pride, in every jealous quarrel, in every impulsive act of desire, she reigned supreme. The war had stretched into years, the sun rising over blood-soaked plains and city walls scarred by countless assaults. Troy and Greece were locked in a deadly rhythm, each side weary yet unyielding, driven by honor, ambition, and desire. And ever-present yet unseen was Eris, the goddess of strife, orchestrating chaos with invisible threads that bound mortals and gods alike. Every choice, every act of courage, every surge of wrath carried the subtle mark of her influence. No mortal could see her, no offering could sway her, and yet, in every battlefield misstep and personal betrayal, her power was undeniable. Major turning points in the long war years of skirmishes had created moments that shaped the fate of nations. The fall of minor outposts, small Greek and Trojan settlements fell not just due to force of arms, but because envy and mistrust weakened defences. Commanders argued, soldiers hesitated, and opportunities were lost to the invisible influence of strife, heroic duels, and tragedy. Individual confrontations, often fought with unmatched bravery, became amplifiers of chaos. Hector's victories inspired jealousy among allies, creating internal friction. Achilles' wrath, though devastating to enemies, destabilized Greek strategy and provoked revenge attacks. Paris, protected by Aphrodite, yet motivated by pride and desire, acted in ways that escalated conflicts and drew unexpected retaliation. Failed negotiations and miscommunications, attempts at truces, messages of diplomacy, and efforts to coordinate forces were often undermined by envy, pride, or misunderstanding. Eris needed only the smallest misstep to turn peace into renewed slaughter. The human psychology of war under strife. Years of relentless battle changed the hearts of mortals. Soldiers' ambition. Young warriors sought glory, sometimes defying orders, their pride driving unnecessary assaults. Leaders' jealousy. Commanders measured honor against one another. Rivalries creating confusion in the ranks, exhaustion and fear. Fatigue made mortals more susceptible to whispers of doubt, increasing the likelihood of error. Eris's whispers flowed subtly. Let pride blind your judgment. Let envy guide your hand. Let desire dictate your action. Even those known for wisdom and restraint, like Odysseus or Hector, found themselves swayed, acting in ways that furthered chaos and amplified tragedy. Divine influence and intervention. The gods, caught in their own rivalries, interacted with the mortals, sometimes worsening the situation. Athena guided Greek commanders, yet her insight was often ignored or misapplied due to mortal pride. Aphrodite ensured Paris's devotion to Helen, fueling personal rivalries and ongoing conflict. Hera encouraged ambition among Greek leaders, intensifying jealousy and reckless actions Zeus observed. Realizing that Eris's subtle threads often overpowered his divine authority. Every mortal decision, every clash of arms, every act of vengeance was now entangled with both divine and mortal flaws, magnified by Eris's patient hand. The cumulative effect of Eris's influence. Over time, the invisible power of strife reshaped the war itself. Minor battles escalated into major engagements due to personal rivalries. Victories brought pride that led to overconfidence, resulting in unforeseen defeats. Alliances strained under suspicion, envy, and ambition, leaving no side fully unified leaders' decisions, while brave or clever, were often undermined by subtle human error amplified by strife. The battlefield became a living web of consequence, where every action, no matter how small, contributed to the eventual unraveling of Troy and Greek unity. The legacy of heroism and folly. Even the most heroic acts carried both glory and doom. Hector's courage inspired generations, yet his pride occasionally jeopardized the city's defenses. Achilles' wrath brought fear to enemies, but also provoked dangerous retaliation and internal tension. Odysseus's cunning allowed victories, yet personal envy and ambition sometimes turned strategy into disaster. Every human triumph contained the seeds of future tragedy, every moment of bravery intertwined with the quiet orchestration of Eris. The war's shadow grows longer by now. The Trojan War was no longer just a series of battles. It had become a saga of human frailty and divine influence, a story of pride, envy, desire, and relentless conflict. Mortals acted under the invisible guidance of strife, often unaware of the goddess's presence. Gods, though mighty, could not fully control the cascade of human decisions shaped by Eris. The cumulative weight of ambition, jealousy, and wrath ensured that the war would continue for years, leaving cities weakened, families grieving, and heroes immortalized yet marked by tragedy. Eris's triumph was subtle, yet absolute. She needed no army, no temple, no open display of power. In every duel, every failed alliance, every impulsive act, she reigned supreme. Her influence, invisible, but undeniable. The silent commander of history. The goddess of strife had transformed the war into her battlefield. Every victory was Pyrrhic, every loss carried hidden consequence. The war's shadow fell not only across the battlefield but across generations, shaping stories and legends to come. Mortals and gods alike were caught in her web, guided by ambition, pride, and desire. The war's shadow stretched across Troy, the Greek lands, and the hearts of all who fought. And above it all, Eris moved silently, patiently, eternally, shaping history through the subtle manipulation of human flaws. Troy, radiant yet flawed, had become the center of a maelstrom of ambition, desire, and strife. The city, its walls fortified and its citizens proud, stood as a symbol of mortal ingenuity, bravery, and determination. Yet even the strongest city could not contain the invisible force that now moved relentlessly among its streets, plazas, and battlements. That force was Eris, the goddess of strife, whose influence needed no army, no temple, no crown. For generations, mortals had believed that empires could control chaos, that order could be imposed on the world through walls, laws, and armies. Troy itself had been a testament to such ambition, a civilization built to resist both invaders and the whims of fate. But chaos, when subtle and patient, cannot be caged, and Eris, silent and eternal, had no intention of being confined. The city and its leaders. King Priam, the aged yet determined ruler of Troy, had spent decades trying to ensure order in a world increasingly governed by pride and envy. He built walls and fortifications that were said to be impregnable. He appointed generals, commanders, and advisors to maintain discipline and enforce strategy. He called for councils, meetings, and pacts to maintain unity among citizens and soldiers alike. Yet no fortress could contain ambition. No decree could restrain desire. No strategy could anticipate the subtle manipulations of Eris, who whispered in the hearts of mortals and sowed doubt even in the minds of kings. Even Priam, wise and venerable, could feel the creeping unrest. Subtle disagreements among generals became open arguments. Minor jealousies among soldiers escalated into reckless acts. Families quarrelled, fearing for their sons and brothers, yet unable to restrain their own pride and anger. The illusion of control. Troy believed itself to be an empire of order, yet every structure of control was subject to human flaw. Walls could not prevent betrayal, laws could not restrain desire or envy. Leaders could not fully predict the choices of those under their command. Eris, invisible and patient, understood the limits of mortal ambition. Build your walls, issue your decrees, gather your armies. None will cage the chaos within. Even as Priam strategized to protect his city, minor miscommunications, personal rivalries, and ambition began to erode unity. Trojan officers, though loyal, were often influenced by envy or pride, questioning orders and pursuing personal glory. Soldiers, though brave, sometimes acted impulsively, spurred by whispers of fear, desire, or ambition. In all of this, Troy's leaders believed they maintained control, yet every step reinforced the invisible threads of strife. Divine observers and their limitations. The gods, who had long competed for influence over mortals, watched with interest and sometimes frustration as Troy attempted to impose order. Athena, ever strategic, offered counsel to Greek forces, knowing that order and discipline could counteract chaos. Aphrodite continued to shield Paris, ensuring that his devotion to Helen perpetuated discord within Troy. Hera encouraged ambition among Greek leaders, making the Greek army unpredictable yet formidable. Zeus, observing all, realized that no mortal effort could contain the subtle influence of the goddess of strife. Even divine insight had its limitations. Where mortals attempted to impose order, Eris worked quietly, turning pride into hubris, ambition into rivalry, and loyalty into doubt. The long shadow of strife. The years of siege and skirmishes left Troy constantly on edge. Supply lines were disrupted not just by enemy action but by internal miscommunication and jealousy among commanders. Skirmishes, minor at first, escalated due to personal rivalries or impulsive acts of pride. Attempts at diplomacy or negotiation were undermined by envy, mistrust, and the subtle hand of Eris. The empire, though outwardly strong, was increasingly fractured within. Its people grew weary, its leaders frustrated, and its soldiers fearful. The very structures meant to contain chaos now amplified it. Heroes, leaders, and the price of ambition. The great heroes of the war exemplified both the glory and the peril of human ambition. Hector, noble yet proud, struggled to balance personal honor with the needs of the city. Paris, guided by desire and divine favor, provoked repeated conflicts that strained both citizens and allies. Achilles, mercurial and wrathful, challenged both enemies and allies alike, his deeds simultaneously brilliant and destabilizing. Odysseus, cunning and perceptive, sometimes used ambition as a weapon, inadvertently creating additional chaos. Each hero, though celebrated, carried within them the seeds of discord. Eris amplified these seeds, ensuring that heroism and folly were intertwined. The empire could celebrate victories, but every triumph contained the potential for disaster, the unraveling of order. Despite Priam's efforts, the threads of chaos could not be contained. Rivalries among generals undermined coordinated defences. Minor mistakes led to unexpected casualties. Fear and ambition influenced decisions more than reason or strategy. Eris whispered in the hearts of all, "You believe yourselves in control. Your walls, your armies, your laws, they are illusions. The chaos within cannot be caged." Even the most disciplined soldiers found themselves drawn into unnecessary conflicts. Even the most careful strategies were undone by pride, envy, or desire. Troy, the empire that sought to contain chaos, discovered that chaos was not an enemy to defeat, but a force to endure, and one that couldn't be imprisoned. The invisible threads of history. The city's attempts to cage strife left a profound legacy. Mortals' actions, driven by ambition and pride, became inseparable from the influence of Eris' divine interventions. Though powerful, could not override subtle human flaws. Every battle, every council, every minor misstep contributed to the inevitable trajectory of the Trojan saga. Even as the empire sought to impose order, the invisible threads of strife guided history. Eris' triumph was quiet, patient, and eternal. She had no need for temples, armies, or recognition. Her victories lay in the subtle reshaping of human choices, the amplification of envy, and the turning of pride into tragedy. The future of Trojan ambition. By now, it was clear that Troy's attempt to cage chaos had failed. The city's walls, though mighty, could not protect against human flaws. Leadership, though skilled, could not prevent subtle discord from growing. Soldiers, though loyal, could not resist the whispers of ambition, envy, and desire. Eris had turned every attempt at order into an instrument of strife, proving that chaos cannot be confined by walls, decrees, or armies. The empire that had sought to cage chaos was now itself shaped by it, each triumph shadowed by the invisible hand of the goddess of discord. Troy's city walls, high and proud, could not contain the invisible force that now swept through its streets and fields. The empire's greatest strength, its ambition and unity, had become its greatest vulnerability under the subtle hand of Eris, goddess of strife. For every order issued by King Priam, for every council convened to maintain unity, there existed a whisper of doubt, a spark of jealousy, a flicker of desire that undermined authority. The city, so confident in its defences, found that chaos did not need siege engines or armies. It moved in whispers, glances, and unspoken rivalries guided by the invisible threads of strife. The battlefield unfolds. The plains before Troy were alive with conflict, though not all of it visible to mortal eyes. Small skirmishes erupted into larger clashes, driven by rivalry or miscommunication. Soldiers, motivated by personal ambition or envy of comrades, disobeyed orders, creating pockets of vulnerability. Heroes fought with unmatched skill, yet their very valour often inspired jealousy, leading to impulsive and reckless acts. Hector, the noble defender of Troy, found that even his leadership could not fully contain the chaos. Every victory he achieved was shadowed by internal dissent. Every tactical choice he made, however wise, carried unintended consequences. Eris whispered in the hearts of allies and enemies alike, "Act for glory, let ambition blind your reason, let envy shape your hand." Heroes and their fatal flourishes. The great mortals of the war exemplified the tension between skill, ambition, and subtle chaos. Achilles, feared and swift, sought vengeance as often as strategy. His wrath inspired fear in enemies, yet provoked deadly retaliation and internal instability. Odysseus, clever and cunning, often manipulated situations for advantage, yet his own ambitions sometimes fostered mistrust among allies. Paris, guided by Aphrodite, continued to provoke both mortal and divine ire, escalating tensions within Troy and beyond. Even the most heroic actions contained seeds of failure. Eris needed no weapon. She required only the flaws and desires that already existed in human hearts. Divine players in a mortal theatre. The gods continued to shape the war, but their interventions often amplified rather than restrained chaos. Athena inspired tactical brilliance in the Greeks, yet human pride frequently turned strategy into overreach. Aphrodite ensured Paris's devotion to Helen, fueling jealousy and conflict both within Troy and among the gods. Hera encouraged rivalry among Greek commanders, making even disciplined troops unpredictable. Zeus, ever cautious, observed as strife grew beyond mortal or divine control. In every moment, mortals acted with apparent free will, yet the threads of Eris wove through every decision, magnifying ambition, pride, and desire. Betrayals and internal divisions. As the war dragged on, internal divisions grew more dangerous. Trojan commanders quarrelled over tactics, leaving gaps exploited by Greek forces. Minor disputes among soldiers escalated into acts of recklessness, undermining coordinated attacks. Fear, fatigue, and frustration festered. Magnifying mistrust and resentment, Eris thrived in these cracks. Where mortals saw loyalty, she sowed doubt. Where mortals saw strategy, she whispered ambition. Where mortals sought honour, she amplified envy. The city that had attempted to cage chaos now found chaos, caged it instead. Human cost and the shadow of legend. The human toll was immense. Families mourned sons, husbands and brothers lost in skirmishes, both great and small. Soldiers carried guilt for acts done in anger, pride or jealousy. Leaders grappled with impossible choices, knowing that even success could carry unforeseen consequences. Yet through all of this, the war became legend. Every duel, every siege, every act of heroism or folly was recorded in memory, song, and story. The subtle influence of Eris ensured that every victory was tinged with the potential for disaster. Mortals and gods alike moved under the shadow of strife, caught in the threads of chaos they could neither see nor escape. The failure of control. Despite centuries of ambition, walls, laws, and armies, the empire that tried to cage chaos had failed. Troy's mighty walls could not restrain envy or ambition. Leadership, however skilled, could not prevent the invisible hand of strife from shaping events. Soldiers, heroes, and families all acted under subtle influence, unknowingly serving the goddess of discord. Eris' triumph was quiet, patient, and eternal. She required no temple, no recognition, no army. Her victory lay in the subtle reshaping of human ambition, the amplification of desire, and the turning of pride into tragedy. The empire had tried to cage chaos. It had failed. And in that failure, Eris's influence stretched beyond Troy, beyond Greece, beyond the memory of mortals, into the realm of legend itself. The once proud city of Troy, with its towering walls and disciplined armies, had entered the twilight of its illusion of control. Years of warfare, years of unrelenting pressure, and years of subtle manipulation had left its leaders weary, its citizens fearful, and its warriors restless. The goddess of strife, Eris, remained unseen, yet undeniably present, her influence now fully woven into the very fabric of the city's life. No stone, no decree, no council meeting could contain the growing turbulence within. The empire that had tried to cage chaos now faced its inexorable unraveling. The escalation of conflict, minor incidents became decisive turning points. A Greek scout misinterpreted the movement of Trojan forces, leading to a skirmish that escalated into full-scale engagement rivalries among Trojan generals caused conflicting orders, weakening defences at critical points. Soldiers, tired of prolonged warfare, acted impulsively, leaving gaps that enemies exploited. Eris, silent and patient, needed only these flaws to shape the outcome of battles. Her whispers guided envy, stoked pride, and fueled ambition. The goddess required no direct intervention. The city's own divisions and desires were sufficient. Heroes caught in the web of strife. Even the greatest mortals were not immune to Eris's influence. Hector, valiant and wise, struggled to balance personal honor with the needs of the city. His victories were often shadowed by jealousy among allies, leading to uncoordinated defense. Paris, whose devotion to Helen had started the conflict, continued to provoke tension within the city and among the gods. His actions, guided by desire and divine protection, repeatedly forced strategic compromises. Achilles, though operating on the Greek side, remained a force of destabilization, his wrath and pride creating unforeseen consequences for both enemy and ally. Odysseus, ever cunning, found that even the cleverest plans could be undone by the smallest spark of envy or mistrust within the ranks. Every heroic action carried dual consequences, glory and danger intertwined, the failure of unity. Attempts to maintain cohesion faltered under the weight of subtle discord. The council of Trojan leaders, once a symbol of wisdom and coordination, now dissolved into arguments over honor, priority, and pride. Soldiers, observing their leaders' rivalries, grew uncertain, hesitating at moments when decisive action could have altered outcomes. Families, anxious for the safety of their sons and husbands, introduced further tension into the social fabric of the city. Eris's presence was evident not in thunder or fire, but in the erosion of trust, the amplification of pride, and the whispering of ambition in every heart. Divine influence and mortal folly. The gods, once able to sway the course of events, now found their interventions tangled in Eris's web. Athena inspired Greek leaders toward tactical brilliance, yet human pride and impatience undermined careful planning. Aphrodite's protection of Paris ensured that desire and conflict continued to disrupt Trojan cohesion. Hera, ever strategic, fueled ambition and rivalry among Greek leaders, further complicating the war's outcome. Zeus, observing from Olympus, acknowledged that even divine authority could not fully contain the chaos Eris wielded through mortal hearts. In every clash of arms, in every misjudged order, the interplay of divine and mortal flaw intensified, creating a battlefield in which victory was elusive and tragedy inevitable. the culmination of chaos. As the war pressed on, Troy's walls could no longer protect against the invisible fractures within. Command structures failed at critical moments, leaving soldiers exposed. Minor disputes, if ignored, blossomed into full-blown mutinies or misdirected attacks. Exhaustion and grief wore down even the most disciplined units, magnifying mistakes. Eris, unseen, guided each flaw to its ultimate consequence. She required no army, no open battle, and no recognition. The Empire's own flaws were her instruments. The legendary fall born from strife. The combination of mortal ambition, divine interference, and Eris's subtle guidance ensured that Troy's fate was sealed long before the first walls were breached. Every victory contained seeds of disaster. Every act of heroism carried hidden consequences. Every decision, minor or great, reinforced the invisible threads of chaos woven by Eris. The empire that sought to cage strife could not even contain it within its own walls. Order was a fleeting illusion. Chaos, patient and eternal, was the true master of Troy's destiny. Eris' triumph in silence. Eris's triumph was complete and eternal. She needed no monuments, no armies, no sacrifices. Her victory lay in the subtle shaping of human choices, the amplification of desire and envy, and the turning of pride into tragedy. Troy's attempt to cage chaos became the very instrument of its unravelling, each flaw magnified by her invisible hand. Through centuries, the tale of Troy would endure, not only as a story of war and heroism, but as a testament to the uncontainable nature of strife. The Empire had tried to impose order. It had failed, and in that failure, the goddess of discord walked silently among mortals and gods, her influence eternal and undeniable. The city of Troy, once radiant with ambition and fortified by walls that had defied countless sieges, now faced the inevitable. For years, the invisible threads of strife had guided its fate, woven into every heart, every decision, every act of courage and folly. The goddess Eris, unseen yet omnipresent, had orchestrated the grandest play of discord ever witnessed, and now her work approached its climax. Troy, despite the heroism of its defenders, the wisdom of its elders, and the bravery of its warriors, could not withstand the relentless accumulation of human flaw, divine rivalry, and subtle manipulation. The city that had tried to cage chaos had become a testament to the futility of resisting the eternal force of strife. The invisible architect of downfall. No Greek soldier could claim credit for the city's fall. No siege engine, no arrow, no fire could alone account for Troy's unravelling. The threads of discord had done their work long before the first walls crumbled. Rivalries among Trojan commanders led to miscommunication and misaligned defences. Personal pride and ambition among Greek leaders amplified victories while creating gaps in strategy. Heroic duels, while magnificent in their bravery, often escalated conflicts in ways that undermined cohesion. Eris required no battlefield, no army, no altar. Her power was woven into choice, magnified by flaw, amplified by ambition, and immortalized through legend. The final days of the city. As Troy faced its last days, the impact of strife became undeniable. Food and supplies, long stretched thin by years of siege, faltered under human error and mistrust. Trojans, though united in intent, were divided in execution, each personal quarrel magnifying the city's vulnerability. Heroes acted bravely yet unpredictably, their valour feeding the goddess's invisible hand. The Greeks, though formidable, often advanced not through direct force alone, but through exploiting the cracks in cohesion that Eris had long cultivated. Every misstep hesitation, and clash of pride carried the imprint of strife incarnate. The city's walls, impressive though they were, could not shield it from human ambition, envy, or desire. Heroes and the weight of fate. Even the most celebrated heroes now faced the limits of mortal agency. Hector, noble and unwavering, saw that his courage could not counter the internal fractures within Troy. Paris, once the catalyst for war through desire, now struggled to act in a way that might preserve the city he loved, only to find every choice fraught with peril. Achilles, operating from afar, remained a force of both destruction and unintended consequence. Odysseus, cunning as ever, exploited opportunities, yet even his cleverness could not escape the tangled threads of destiny shaped by strife. Eris's influence ensured that heroism was inseparable from tragedy, that courage was inseparable from flaw, and that victory was inseparable from cost. The invisible war beyond mortal sight. The fall of Troy was not simply a war fought with weapons and shields. It was a war fought in hearts and minds, in ambition, envy, pride, and desire. Every council meeting and command issued carried the weight of human flaw. Every heroic duel carried both glory and consequence. Every strategic choice was filtered through the invisible whisper of Eris. The goddess needed no recognition. She required no temples. She demanded no sacrifices. Her triumph was absolute, eternal, and silent, woven into the very fabric of history. The legacy of eternal strife. With Troy's fall, Eris's influence extended beyond the mortal realm. Stories, songs, and legends preserved her power, ensuring that the memory of strife would outlast even the greatest heroes. Mortal ambition, pride, and envy continued to echo through history, shaped by the invisible patterns she set in motion. Even gods who had watched and influenced the war could not undo the ripple of consequences her subtle hand had orchestrated. Eris had transcended mortal time. Her work, beginning with the Golden Apple and continuing through years of war, demonstrated that discord cannot be caged, contained, or destroyed. It endures beyond empires, heroes, and civilizations. Eris beyond time. The goddess of strife had no beginning and no end. She existed in the spaces between choices, in the quiet impulses that guide action, in the envy and ambition that flare within every heart. She is the whisper that turns loyalty into betrayal. She is the unseen spark that ignites wars long after the original conflict has ended. She is the eternal echo of ambition, desire, and flaw, shaping history through invisible hands. Mortals may build walls, kings may craft laws, armies may march and clash, but chaos, patient and eternal, moves beyond them all, guided by the unseen hand of Eris. The end of an era and the eternal continuum. The fall of Troy marked the end of one chapter in history and the beginning of another. The city itself lay in ruins, yet its story became immortal. Heroes' names endured, their deeds celebrated even as their flaws were remembered. The goddess of strife continued to shape human choices, unseen but ever present, ensuring that no age could escape the influence of discord. Eris had moved beyond time, beyond recognition, beyond mortal understanding. Her influence, subtle yet absolute, ensured that every empire, every civilization, every human endeavor would continue to dance on the edge of chaos. The final reflection. History remembers heroes, kings, and cities. History celebrates victories and mourns defeats. But the truest, most enduring force, the invisible hand shaping choice, ambition, and desire, remains beyond sight. Eris, goddess of strife, walks silently among mortals and gods alike. She needs no crown, no altar, no army. Her triumph is eternal. In every quarrel, every rivalry, every act of ambition or pride, in every empire that rises and falls, in every human heart that struggles with envy, desire, and conflict. Time may pass, empires may crumble, and heroes may fade into legend. But Eris endures, eternal and unseen, the goddess of discord, who cannot be caged.